This is sort of a pre-council speak out, because they're not going to let you speak for more than a minute or two inside council. And of course, the most important issue, they're trying to shut down the Ross camp and ignore the recommendations from 3 city council members who want to pass safe parking zones, homeless emergency, and other important reforms that we need and that would be protective of some homeless people. It's not the paradise on earth, but it is unfortunately not coming up tonight unless this council or 4 progressives bring it up. And we haven't seen they're going to do that yet because they feel they want to wait for an appropriate interval in 2 weeks. I don't agree with that, but many do. So there's the number of differences of opinion. I got a speech I've written out, and I'm going to pass it around to folks. But we also have speakers. You're all the speakers. You want to talk about your experiences, what you think is needed by this council, or more important, from this community, because this council has shown itself generally unwilling and unable to do anything other than repress and move around homeless people. That's their deal.
I'm going to let it all hang out.
So, let me call up as a first speaker that notorious Steve Plage. Steve, come up here and regale us. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. I have many times said that people aren't living on the streets in Santa Cruz. They're dying on the streets in Santa Cruz. And it's unconscionable that this council allows that pain, that suffering, that death to continue to take place. Many of us here joined into 2 council members, Chris Crone and Drew Glover, in what we thought were good faith efforts to create real change, to create ordinances that would address 24-hour access to bathrooms, that would address decriminalizing homelessness, would address creating real RV parking for the many, many people who are RV dwellers. When you go into this council tonight, you will not be hearing about an ordinance that creates true RV parking and relief for RV dwellers. You will not be hearing about decriminalizing homelessness by doing away with the many onerous ordinances and citation level things that they're still doing, even in the face of federal law. You will not be hearing about an ordinance that allows 24-hour access to bathrooms. After 10 o'clock at night in this city, there's not one bathroom open for homeless people to be able to relieve themselves. You will not be hearing that tonight from this council. What you will be hearing by them is discussion, is dialogue, is delay, is further dithering while people continue to suffer, people continue to die, and people to experience real pain on the streets being unsheltered. I urge all of you to come in tonight and tell this council to act now, to do these things they need to relieve the suffering now, to say we have had enough delay. Do not come tonight as supplicants requesting some relief from this council. Come as citizens demanding that you stand up for the homeless folks in this town and do what's right for them. Demand those rights, demand those actions, demand those ordinances, because I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that right now, that pain and death and suffering is on them. If we don't stand up and speak tonight, it's on us as well. Take that with you when you go into these chambers. Demand those rights. No longer request. Demand. That's why we're here. And that's where we can do some good. Thanks for coming. Let's get it done. Hey, this is Phil Posner, who is from Conscience and Action.
So everyone, I have a 4-minute talk, and at the end of my talk, I'm inviting people to read with me this handout. So if you haven't gotten the handout, I'll give you one. It won't make sense until you hear the speech, but when you hear my talk, you'll understand why we're closing with me with this note. Thanks so much for coming.
Now we have an actual person who isn't just a housed person like the last 3 speakers, myself included. There's a woman who lives in her RV who tried to get some straight talk from the police chief without much success.
My name's Alicia. I'm here to support the Glover Crone proposal proposals. We worked on those as a team. Homeless people, council members, and interns. We worked on those as a team. That was a team effort by homeless people, council members, and interns. Those proposals were written with heart. They called for immediate action. We need immediate action, both for the homeless and for the community. We don't need to spend any more money on conversations. We don't need to spend any more money on research. We know what is needed, and we need it now. We worked on that together. We're all here because we need immediate action. Stop talking about it. I know.
Everybody said pretty much everything that I want to say. We need to have the bathrooms open for everybody 24 hours. These bathrooms here are not open during business hours. It's not okay. It needs to change.
Okay, everyone, welcome to this action. We need people to go in and tell their story. As agonizing as this is, to stand in this line and wait to speak, they need to really hear from people that are impacted by the policies that are denying people access to shelter and housing and safety on the streets. And I hear stories from everybody that are heart-wrenching. It would be much more powerful if everyone out here shared their own story of what it's like to try to find a place to sleep in Santa Cruz in this horrible cold weather without losing your stuff, without having your things stolen, without your car being towed, with all the issues that we face. So please, I encourage you to stay as long as you can and get in line and share your story about what these policies are supposed to be doing. Now, if you were here like about 2 years ago, they had a homeless task force, and they had there's going to be bathrooms, and there was going to be charging centers, and there's going to be storage. All stuff that could just be done. That's 2 years since that report came out. After is it about 2 years, right? I think it's about 2 years. And we camped out here originally every Tuesday for 2 years, and police forced them to have this task force, which then proposed stuff that would help people, which they never actually did. So we can remind them, where are the charging stations? Where are all these bathrooms? Where are all these things that they're like...
Where's our safety? Where's the safety for everyone? Yeah. We all deserve to be safe.
Exactly. So make sure your voice is heard tonight. And hang in there. It can be long and boring, but it's really important that you'll be televised on cable TV, and a lot of people actually pass their videos around of that. So it has wide impact in the community, as will Wes's film for sure. So thank you. Bye-bye. There's free food over here also.
Well, people should also know that what they are considering doing is closing the Ross camp without alternative shelters. Now, they say they have alternative shelters, but they've been saying this for 2 years, that they have alternative shelters. This winter, there was less shelter than last winter in terms of indoor shelter. And I'm no fan of the shelter system, but I'm no fan of lying staff by the city council and lying reports by the city manager that are now going to be used to please bigots and fearmongers who want to close the homeless campground that has been set up by homeless people themselves. Yeah, they're getting a little support. They're getting a little support from porta potties. They're getting a little support from trash pickups. That's good. But it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't moved there themselves. So there are over 200 tents out there now. I think that's what you counted.
198.
That was a week ago.
198 tents at the Ross camp. And I also want to talk about the fact that shelters do not meet the needs of all of the homeless citizens. There are a lot of people who can't leave their partners, their pets. The shelter in Watsonville is not a good option for a lot of people here. The shelter, opening a couple of shelter beds and including that as a potential proposal for this problem is not going to solve the problem. It left out a lot of things that our proposals included. And so if you really, really want to solve this problem, opening up a couple shelter beds is not going to do it. We need immediate action that includes way more than that. Please, please address the clever proposals and do them immediately.
Now this building here is going to be empty tonight, I'd like to point out. And there's going to be heavy rain coming in about 2 hours. Now for people who are in the Ross camp for the moment, some of them have tarps, and I also brought along these for people who want to cover their asses around the rain that's coming in, if nothing else. These are garbage bags. No, I'm not suggesting that people are garbage, but this will protect you in the most minimal way in your stuff if you're outside. So if you want one, grab a bag.
No eviction notices for the Ross camp.
I'm a gentleman.
No
My name is Sonny
eviction
Lopez.
notices for the Ross camp.
My name is Sonny Lopez.
Serve 'em.
I carried a red bag around this town just to show a prime example of where a hazmat red box should be. And it shouldn't be over there at the end of the levee. If we actually really care about Santa Cruz, we already have the advertisement for families and friends and individuals who come around all around the world to that beach. Think big or go home, right? That hazmat box should be over there at that post office. 17 lives, 17 kids, 16 needles, 16 parents, 7 needles, 7 friends, 1 needle, 1 loving friend that's right next to you that go to that beach. I'm an individual who picks it up and who actually cares about each and every of you guys' lives.
The same people.
I'm an adult, but you know what? We're all living here together. That hazmat place shouldn't be there. And also, those tents, those are the people who actually put me under their wing. I'm dry, I'm warm. The folks and individuals didn't give me a roof over my head. They gave me a law. They put the law on me. Look what they did. They're using my kids, and I graduated from a batter's treatment, domestic violence. I graduated 5,000 hours of community service here in Santa Cruz within 2 years. Cleaning it up with downtown street teams. Did we make a difference? Leading a team of group members of elders that are older than any of you guys, who cleaned your city, who cleaned your town, who care about each other. But when you want to tactics like this, where are we going to go? River Street Camp? I got kicked out of there before by Chris and another individual. And I was put out in the streets.
So tonight, none of these things that Sonny suggests, which is to say sharps containers in the city, they don't allow sharps containers in our city because Take Back Santa Cruz and its pals on the city council are afraid that they have the needle mania hysteria. They want to hide from it or arrest every needle user or drive people out of town. That's their non-solution. The real question for us is, because they're not addressing these issues tonight, and because the issue they are pushing is to shut down the Ross camp, that's the biggest, longest item. This whole session is about, let me tell you, about homelessness as managed by the city manager and the staff of the city, which means they want to get the money from the federal government, they want to get the money from the state government, and they want to talk these things until they are sufficiently sure they're not offending the people on the west side who live in houses, people on the east side who live in houses, but the people who live outside, well, they can fend for themselves, because after all, we know they're just the homeless people. You know, I care about them. So, indeed, I think we need, you know, I'm not feeling terribly well myself, but I think, you know, I said before, this building is empty at night. Now, the bathrooms are open, but they will close and stay closed until the next city council meeting. after the council closes, that's a crime. An hour after, half an hour after the council closes.
The Supreme Court, I'm pretty sure, said we're allowed to sleep in places like this.
There is a court decision that says you can sleep. They cannot make a law that bans you from sleeping everywhere. So what they do is they create all these places where it's illegal. There's the place Bill talking about. Oh wait, he gets to go. But in any case, it's his forces. Come on, Andy, come and talk to us. A bunch of people here are interested. In any case, it's legal. It's no longer legal to arrest people for sleeping, period. So they'll arrest you for being in a closed area. They'll arrest you for trespass. They'll give you a stay-away order. They'll arrest you for blocking the sidewalk. These are all their kind of routine, the way they do it. One of the things we wanted to bring up tonight, and the 3 council members tried to bring up, was that these laws they're using are not laws that have to do with the general health and safety. They're laws that have to do with giving police greater powers to move homeless people from one area to another at the whim of merchants and residents and people who feel uncomfortable with them around. We wanted to have those laws brought up, but the city manager insisted on something else, and we did not have enough balls on our city council to insist that they be brought up tonight. So they're going to move, they have already moved, to have 2 weeks from tonight. They're going to bring it up. Well, during that, I'm hoping that at least 4 council members will say, don't close the Ross camp. But if one of them strays, if one of them goes to the other side, the city managers demolish the Ross camp and the next month plan goes ahead. That's what's on the agenda anyway. So, council meeting is divided into 2 sessions. The first session is called oral communications. You can talk about anything but homelessness. You can talk about anything that's not in the homelessness report. But the only thing in the report is the Ross camp closing, and Brent Adams gets $5,000 for some blankets. And they're going to open some shelters somewhere. You can talk about life on the streets, but you must distinguish it from the homeless proposal. It's kind of hard. So I'm going to talk about the city council's process and how they're shutting people up and shutting people down. If you've been discriminated against in this town, talk about that during the first half hour here. You'll have 2 minutes maybe to talk about it. For the rest of the evening, they are talking about the homelessness agenda, which is their agenda and not the real issues, but you can still talk about anything around homelessness then. So I just wanted to clarify that's what they're doing. Anybody got any questions or want to speak about something that they've experienced outside? Come on up. Just talking about closing the Ross camp, $5,000 for Brent Adams, and a lot of talk with county authorities about maybe doing something down the road, opening up the same limited shelters that they have now. That's what's on. So it looks like a large crowd here tonight. I'm not sure what people... I suspect that it's going to be, if you want to get into the council chambers, you should probably line up. This should be in the Civic Auditorium, of course, but they haven't. Civic Auditorium is the big building across the street, as you may know, where there's room for a large crowd. But even though council members said they wanted to move it, it doesn't look like it's been moved. So that's another thing that they're not doing tonight. And the weather update is heavy rain starting at 8. 7 o'clock. Alicia, something else you want to say for that? I'm getting tired of talking.
No, I'm never tired of talking. I just want to say that, along with what I said earlier, I'm just going to reiterate really, we need to be really addressed. We worked on those together. is just going to put those people back into the bushes, other parts of the community, so that people can complain about them again. It puts them back into crimes of survival, trespassing, a bunch of other issues that I'm concerned about. I really feel like ignoring the proposals that we made that address the homelessness as a whole, and going with the proposal that just includes a couple of shelter beds doesn't do a service to anybody. That should be concerning to everybody that it doesn't address the issue. It's wasted money and it's wasted talk. It's not going to do anything. So it's also concerning that the mayor ignored 3 of her council members that worked hard with the community to do these things, and that she ignored that and put our proposals off. Our proposals were time sensitive. They were put together because those people need immediate action. They haven't had any showers. I really think they wouldn't have even had disabled toilets there if I hadn't collected the data that I did that told them that 3 people were living there in a wheelchair and couldn't even use the restroom. So those proposals were of time-sensitive nature because of the fact that it's for health and safety. They need showers, they need running water. When I got there, the hand washing stations weren't even working, so part of my report included fixing that. So I mean, these are issues that now we're not going to address for several weeks from now. That's concerning to everybody. I really think that everybody should be paying attention to that. Those issues alone are concerning for health and safety.
He's man. I sacrificed a spot to be with my family, my kids, my children as a father, to be out here with the charges, but I'm out here with the ones who actually care about me, my elders, the individuals who actually kept me in a safe spot, warm, and not wet. Not officers that keep me in jail either, and keep me away from actually female and warm. I'm sorry. Right now, it's safety for everybody's lives. We are all human. We're not dogs. We're not an animal. We're human. We have kids. We have something important to actually pass on to people. Those lives, those individuals, that next generation that we care about.
And everybody deserves the basic necessities. We're not asking for penthouses and condos. We're asking for safe places to exist. That's all we're asking for. We're asking to not be penalized because we can't afford rent. We're in a crisis right now. A lot of people can't afford rent. A lot of people are resorting to RVs and vehicular dwelling. A lot of people are losing their houses and having to resort to that kind of living. We need to pay attention to that. It's a growing situation. It's not a crime to not be able to afford rent in this housing crisis. People with families are having a hard time paying $3,000 and $5,000, $6,000 a month for rent, especially if you're like me. I'm in one-income household.
You want to go in? Go in now, because they're gonna take up all the seats.
There's a lot of people like me. We struggle. We need help. We need affordable housing. Not everybody needs a shelter and a guided lifestyle either. Some of us just need affordable housing.
My name is Sherry Shree, and I'd like to talk about, a couple of things. One, I hope you don't put the library under parking. I would never go to the library. I'd have to go to the Live Oak Library, or library less toxic. And another thing, I was listening to Gary Patton talk on KZSC, because I get around and I listen to the cool radio stations. I love that one. And he was talking how they, that pristine meadow over there that they're keeping, that they're going to put 50% of the land, they're going to give 250 students, and then the other 2,000 students are going to cram into the other 50% of the land. And it's appalling that we get 10,000 students dumped on us, and you, the city council, could stop that, but it's the region. They have no clue how to run the university, and that's why they're already overloaded
housing situation here, so I'm just asking you to ask the chancellor to get a clue on what they're doing with the planning commission. I think we all need more planning commissions planning for the planning commission. It's really depressing what's going on. There's no housing for me, and all the students, I shouldn't get mad at them because they have to pay $1,200 per semester and live with poor people, and we're all having a hard time. I'm just asking you to use your conscience, use your heart, and build more houses for all of us, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Lee Brokaw. I read newspapers. I work on the other side. I want to give you some idea of what the rest of the other Bay Area is saying. From recent Bay Area newspapers, December 2018, East Palo Alto, the largest landlord, announced its plan to tear down 160 controlled apartments and replace them with 605. The current residents will be relocated to similar apartments and allowed to return at their same monthly rate. What would Sherry Conable do? January 18th, 2019, Regional Bay Area Agencies, Metro Transportation Association, Association of Bay Area Governments, are in the process of creating a new agency, CASA, Committee to Save the Bay Area, which will bring rent control to 9 Bay Area counties. What would Sherry do? January 30th, after 41 years of renting a Section 8 apartment, Joseph Hackey rent was increased from $14.67 to $24.67. What would Sherry Conable do? January 31st, Menlo Park, ordinance limiting rent hikes is pulled. What would Sherry do? February 4th, new affordable housing in San Jose designated for formerly homeless, foster youth, and developmentally disabled is proposed near Roosevelt Park. The City Council has considered a $9 million loan to support the project. What would Sherry Conable do? February 11th, Menlo Park Council gets plans for rent caps. What would Sherry do? Let this be the mantra for the City Council in the calendar year of 2019. Let's move the ball on housing the homeless and those who work here. Let's be guided by one question. What would Sherry do?
Hello, my name is Elliot. I know I don't have a lot of time. That's one of the things I'd like to point out, is that you're not giving us a lot of time in a lot of these meetings. Mainly, I'm here to request that the City Council look into things related to harm reduction, which I know is a philosophy not all of you are unfamiliar with, and I don't need to explain the whole thing. I'd just like to point out that if you care about the city, you should be reducing harm in it, and there's a whole philosophy of tactics around how to do that you could be looking into. Also, the people outside were saying something about a loudspeaker. I'm not sure if they can hear what's going on in here, and I think that maybe you should look into that. Thank you.
Hello, Council. My name is Ben, and I also would like to speak to you all about harm reduction. Essentially, what I want to talk about is the fact that harm reduction is largely shown to, well, I mean, it does what it says on the tin, reduce harm. Providing services like free HIV testing, providing safe sex contraceptives, free naloxone, opiate overdose reversal kits, free Hep C testing, first aid and supplies, and access to clean needles and responsible disposal. In general, these all are ways to protect the public at large, not only people who unfortunately are addicted to drugs, but those who might be sort of secondarily affected by things like needle litter, or perhaps even, I mean, it's just having things like Narcan available. It's protecting people from things that are scary like that. Like it's to protect the public. Thank you.
Thank you everybody. How many of you were working in 1972? Can I see some hands? Anyone on council? 1972? Nobody? No. Okay. Hey, do you think it was pretty?
I'm gonna go ahead and pause the comment. This is the time for you to address the.
All right. I'm just 1972, the real wage is adjusted for inflation, cost of living, and among other things, guess what it would be at? $34 an hour. Guess what we were getting paid? Not even 15. 10 years ago, I was working for $12 an hour in retail in New York City. I'm here, and I can't even make more than that in this town. Something is terribly wrong if you want us to thrive in this next generation. It's time to pass the torch and realize that your city's revenue depends on low-income spenders. Your revenue depends on a lot of sales, and that requires a lot of people. You don't get a lot of billionaires buying 35 pairs of jeans. You get a lot of single individuals buying a jean here and a jean there. We need $20 minimum wage right now, $25 by 22, maybe even more. But what we need to talk about here is city revenue would increase with more low-income spending across the board. We're getting paid below what we're worth. If you value us and you value the city, I think you will see that $20 minimum wage is not a whole lot to ask for, especially living in one of the most expensive places in the world to live. We can do better. We can do better for each other. And guess who tends to be getting paid the least? It's not white guys like me, I'll tell you that much. Okay? It's our Mexican brothers and sisters, our Latinx brothers and sisters, our people of color brothers and sisters, and non-gender identity people. We love you all, but $20 minimum wage, folks. Let's fight for that. Thank you.
I'd like to raise a concern and also propose a change. Relocation payment ordinance to prevent landlords from evading the ordinance by terminating a tenancy and raising rent on subsequent tenants beyond the rent thresholds. You can simply make it unlawful to terminate a tenancy for the purposes of evading the ordinance. I've included language from both the Los Gatos Municipal Code and the California Penal Code that does something very similar. Staff considered including the Los Gatos language when the ordinance was up for consideration, but ultimately opted not to do so. I'm not sure why. I think they might have had concerns that it could be vulnerable to a challenge, Costa-Hawkins challenge, because it included Costa-Hawkins exempt properties. I don't think that it actually does. However, I do think the ordinance as it's written is vulnerable to a legal challenge because the rent cap thresholds are so low, they really don't pass the sniff test as a large rent increase. And there are 2 areas of California law that implicitly define a large rent increase as a 10% annual increase. So, and that's also been a discussion among legal circles. There's no case law on it, but it is an active discussion. So just those 2 things, I think you could strengthen the ordinance, both making it less vulnerable to a legal challenge as it currently is, and also stronger so members can't evade it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kate. I'm going to talk to you about harm reduction and kind of maybe jump on a couple erroneous facts before they're even put out there. Harm reduction is an evidence-based practice that has been repeatedly backed up by peer-reviewed research. Claims that harm reduction encourages or enables drug use are erroneous and not based on academic research and created by anti-drug lobbyists. There have been multitudes of peer-reviewed studies that confirm that harm reduction does not increase drug usage and that it does maximize intervention options, reduce the rates of overdose by providing Narcan and other overdose reduction supplies, reduce the risk of HIV and Hep C transmission, and improve the quality and length of life for drug users. 69% of overdoses in Santa Cruz County occur in the city of Santa Cruz. All harm reduction efforts should be supported in Santa Cruz City. Thank you.
Members of the community, I'm glad to see that 4 council members are standing up for your right to speak in this line. It's a very brief right, but it's a very important one. And this looks like a revolutionary change. I hope it continues. Mayor, 1 minute, Martine Watkins, and I call you that because I call the mayor that because of what she did at the last meeting, has doubled down on her insult to the community, moving from muzzling speakers, shrinking speaking time, and excluding those waiting
hours to speak, to gagging city council members. And I'm referring to the fact that the agenda tonight does not contain items that 3 council members tried to put on. I'll be talking about this further during that actual agenda item. But this is also a matter of procedure at the city council. If the mayor can unilaterally, with the collusion of the city manager and the city attorney, stop items from going on the agenda that 3 council members want on the agenda, we don't have any kind of even pseudo-democracy here. She's refused to agendize the Glover Crone proposals and substituted instead the city manager's dog and pony show. And sadly, the 4 progressives, who I've called out and will continue to call out on this, and I'm glad when they respond, with the power to block this today, allowed this freeze while we dawdle, move along to nowhere deportation policy to spin forward. And that has to do with the Ross camp, which I will talk about later. Last meeting we saw rent control and just eviction, whose advocates were elected to office, silenced, sidelined, and dumped, tabled. More endless task force games as landlords evict tenant activists and drive us deeper into gentrification, producing more homelessness. The Civic Auditorium was supposed to be available for these meetings. Why aren't our council members demanding this be done? Thank you.
Okay, I am going to be talking about creeping fascism in our country and in this city. A lot of people may want to believe that Santa Cruz is so preciously exempt from the creeping fascism that's everywhere in our country right now. But it's not. Madeleine Albright was here warning us about it, which I find a little dubious, but hey, I'll take it. And I want to refer, as I'm speaking, to the Sunday night meeting that was held in the Civic Auditorium. The Lakota People's Law Project called attention to the abusive treatment, the absolutely racist and horrible treatment of Nathan Phillips, a Native American elder. Chase Iron Eyes was there, and a very esteemed attorney that I believe is one of our most just activists, Daniel Sheehan. He is based at the Romero Institute, warned us again of the fascism that's taking place. So what happened on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial is now sort of history for those that heard about it. But at that Civic Auditorium event just the other night, Sunday, February 10th, many representatives from the Native American or First Nation representatives from around the country were there, such as Chase Iron Eyes. Daniel Sheehan warned us about such public relations firms as the behind-the-scenes public relations firms. Like, talk about a name that calls your own BS out. Hey! These are the people that represented the about-face change of spin that young Catholic little boy made when he took back his admission of his treatment. What I'm saying here is, don't think it's not happening here. It is. Our city council is engaged in deep and profound attempts to wed business and corporate interests with the government.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I am natealex.kennedy@gmail.com, and some of the first things I gotta say is bathrooms are a huge issue in the city right now. You're often 15-20 minutes away from one when you feel that you gotta go, and when it takes 15 minutes to get to the toilet or the porta potty, your body gives you about 10. Now, I have even personally had it where I've been walking down the street and quite frankly shit my pants and had to drop it right there, and I'm one of those people guilty of shitting on the sidewalk because I had to. So anyway, I will admit it, I'm wearing a diaper right now, an adult diaper, because I do not want to have to poop somewhere I'm not allowed to. And so what we really need is to have a citywide ordinance requiring that all places that have a bathrooms that say no public restrooms, that if it's available to customers, I should be able to make a $2 deposit on purchase to be able to use that bathroom before, because if I'm ready to explode, the last thing I need is to be choosing what kind of coffee I'm about to drink. And thank God for Starbucks leaving their restrooms open to everybody. I've had the Santa Cruz Coffee Roasting Company kick me out for asking to use a bathroom, swearing at me, using all those words you don't want me to use, as I'm being forced out, and then I crossed the street directly, going to Starbucks, and at that time they did not have any locks at all on the bathroom, so I was able to use that. So anybody looking to use a bathroom, thank God for Starbucks. Go use theirs if you have to. Thank you.
My name is Melissa Freeburn. I'm a registered nurse. This is my expertise, harm reduction. If the city and county want to run a meaningful harm reduction program, then you need to run it properly using best practices. Having 3 kiosks to dispose of your needles is inappropriate, obviously, as our children and our locals are stepping on needles in our beaches and our parks, and it's unacceptable, and we're not going to take it anymore. If you want to allow people to come to this town and shoot up dope and provide them all the necessary supplies to do that, including Narcan, so that they don't have to access medical treatment and actually get services and get help for their addiction, it's not going to come on our beaches anymore. We're not going to allow our children to step on these needles, these cookers, okay? It's unacceptable. I am a registered nurse. This is what I do for a living. You have 80 homeless people this last month that were given over 200 plus needles, not safety needles. Needles that as soon as they toss them anywhere, where do those end up? They end up in our watershed. They end up on our beaches. They don't end up in the city of Capitola. They don't end up on the west side for a reason. They end up on the beach flats. And we're paying attention, and we're sick and tired of it. It's our money. If you're gonna give our money away for this program, then run it properly. The county has already been informed. They've been given solutions. And if you do not take action, they said the city was unwilling to put sharps containers because of the symbolism behind it. We're way past that, okay? When you're handing out needles, boxes of needles, okay? We're way past that. And you need to provide sharps containers, because I, for one, I will hand deliver these needles every day to you until you do something. Pick up your needles. Thank you.
So my name is Jennifer Lanford Brown, and I'm also going to touch on harm reduction. Harm reduction, I remove personally over 6,000 dirty needles a week off the streets. I go out and supply sharps containers, tons of them, to the people at the camp. They can buy them. Here's a list from the SCAP program. They can buy them themselves. They do buy them themselves. They don't have sharps containers to put them in. The county is not providing any needles that they're not taking out of the community. The city is not providing any needles that are not being taken out of the community. Providing Narcan is not continuing opiate addiction. I live on Felker Street. I have received my 90-day notice because my lease is after 5 years. I work with the homeless. I'm a harm reductionist. This is critical. I worked at the River Street Camp, the 1220 project. I was at the heart and forefront of pulling the people out of San Lorenzo, giving them trauma-informed care and harm reduction. It's important to implement that together. We have to. The same people that I helped into housing, navigate into housing, are in the camp. Do you realize there's over 200 people suffering? They don't use Narcan to continue their opiate addiction or to avoid medical services. They're waiting to get into Janus. I have never met anybody who wants to be a drug addict. Not one person. And they're desperate. They would love to get off the streets. People who have received housing and stable housing have gotten off the streets.
Mayor, Council, this is a public service announcement about Warming Center. We're open tomorrow night. We open when the temperature gets really, my challenge to the new council, I'm not making any assumptions about your relationship to the conundrum of homelessness, but my challenge is we're open tomorrow night. We're open for an extreme rain event to To this moment, we have not received 1 penny of funding. It's all community supported, all volunteer oriented. So we give blankets, but what my challenge to council is, before this winter is over, I encourage each one of you to volunteer, because it's just a volunteer program. We make sure that nobody has to sleep outside on the coldest night. We reduce the reality of hypothermia on the street. That is done. We never have to worry about real hypothermia, at least at 38 degrees or less. So I encourage you to sign up via Warming Center Program at Gmail. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bravo. I'm a UCSC student. I'm here speaking on behalf of the UCSC Snail Movement. We're a group of students we're a group of houseless students who are living in our vehicles who have been affected by the housing crisis. We are struggling because we don't have safe places to park and sleep. But we've been sleeping on campus, and we are woken up by the university police every night. They come to our vans at 2 a.m. and shake our vans and bang on them, chasing them, and they threaten to cite us and tow us if we don't come out. And then they tell us to go out into the city and park and sleep in the city. That's not okay. It doesn't have to be that way, and we need help. We need support. We are pressuring the university to provide a safe parking program and designated lots on campus, but we've repeatedly been denied. So we need your help. I mean, we shouldn't have to go out and sleep in the city. The university has the space for us. It's quiet, it's safe, it's monitored. There's just no reason for this. So that's it. And also, please look out for our petition soon. And my email address, we're also looking for donated legal assistance to help us interface with the university better, because what we were doing is not working. So if anyone could please help us, my email address is S as in Sarah, W, Bravo, like Bravo, you did a good job spelling my name, at ucsc.edu.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the university's harassment of students is specifically in your agenda, but that's happening. It's happening every night, and it's escalating the more we speak out and voice our experiences about it. So it's not like we don't lack the infrastructure to support the homelessness. We lack the moral capacity to support the homelessness. The university has talked with us and said that there's no way to pursue any action regarding homeless students. Why? Because of profit. The university profits from the students. The housing market, the student housing market, is one of the biggest profits that the university is getting. So why don't they want to approach their homeless students with respect, with compassion? Because it doesn't give them any profit. So please help us expand your compassion to homelessness, to homeless people, and to homelessness in general. That's all I have to say.
Parking should be on the agenda.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Martine. This is not on your later agenda. I believe this is a sweeping comment that won't help that kind of a conversation that needs to be said. I've been reading in the paper and hearing, which is even more fun because you can't prove it one way or the other, that the city's desire to get in on the $9 to $10 million is supposed to help alleviate homelessness here. And I think the city needs to get rid of all your criminalizing laws, or at least begin that process before you start asking for money to serve people that you've proven you don't like. I really need to see something more than Pamela Comstock and Cynthia Chase floating a wonderful idea, and your staff. I'm not criticizing city staff, but policy is lacking, creativity is lacking, and I need to see a willingness, and really do, or you guys are going to watch me pooping in the street, so I guess. But you can make something small and still chase this nonsensical developer money. You don't have to choose between status quo and what does this person right here need. That you can make decisions that are informed by what you see. If you don't trust what everyone has to see, trip over, try to pick up, try to get a sitting or dry. But just from what you know for sure, add the human element and you'll get a better outcome. You know that. You know I believe in diversity, and I bet every one of you knows why it's dynamic at times. So, I've been watching maybe more than 40 years how we treat people we want to ostracize or just not see. And I've been talking about Mitch Snyder all over town for nothing, it seems like. And I would like to see the city embrace an opportunity that everybody's trying to embrace, but that I can show you about 50 nonprofits that are ready to handle. Do something creative.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. And I'd like to first invite up Mr. Robert Norris, representing HUF, and you'll be given 4 minutes to address the council.
Members of the community and city council. I wonder who picked Susie O'Hara and Tina Scholl to deport and disperse the Ross campground without consulting with the campers. That's the one group you may notice they didn't mention. The joint action plan, as it's described, is words on paper without substance. What is real out there tonight for the next night, the next week, and the next month is the real shelter that real homeless people have provided for themselves out of sheer necessity. That's the shelter this proposal would strip away from them in a month. And I gain no confidence by hearing that, oh, you can go back in 2 weeks and maybe change it. You're going to terrify a bunch of people and drive them into the community is what you're doing. It was largely built and managed by the homeless themselves. You can see this community from Highway 1 as you drive into town, ragged, overcrowded, makeshift, but real. This is a community we're speaking of. It must be spoken to, listened to, and appreciated. Not merely a place where Mills cops parade through with submachine guns. Yes, that's where they were 2 weeks ago, as a training exercise or a show of force. Not just a target for abuse by Take Back Santa Cruz wannabes, taunting residents, or a fundraising source for our staff here. The Ross camp for several hundred people is the only shelter these folks have. And no glowing promises of the city manager, eerily similar to the promises of last fall, last spring, and the fall before from these same 2 individuals before this council, most of them the same, many of them the same. It's the same deal. Again, the city manager and the mayor have replaced the Crone-Glover resolutions. Sorry. These were introduced by 3 council members, prepared on time, well ahead of time, with accompanying staff reports a week ago. We heard a sort of apologia from the mayor, but she didn't allow the council member to respond. Interesting. Or the public. Or the public, thank you. The Glover-Crone proposals include a necessary homeless emergency declaration, not here in this proposal. Reopen enclosed bathrooms, not in this proposal. A review of discriminatory ordinances, not in this proposal. A safe parking plan, a real safe parking plan, with immediate relief for those whose vehicles are their homes. A transitional campground permit process, so that people like Red and other people can actually work on setting something up without having to deal with this endlessly dawdling, delaying, and babbling staff that we have to listen to for hours, while each of us, except for me, because I'm representing a group, gets 2 minutes. If 3 council members can't agendize the most basic and essential initial steps, and instead we witness the proposed destruction of existing shelter, that's the campground, are we really going to swallow Susie O'Hara's pipe dream of a navigation center that navigates nowhere? A fantasy of housing first that doesn't exist? Or Tina Scholl's promise of a few extra tents crammed into the boneyard, barbed wire, River Street campground that served only 60 out of the 1,000 to 1,500 homeless at a huge cost? Or a handful of beds at 7th Avenue and the Salvation Army that can in no way replace the tent city that the city manager proposes to destroy? Is this our vision? Is this what we expect those outside to accept? Sure, folks surviving in tents must prepare for the midnight wake-up calls of Mills Police. The sorry, no public bathrooms here policies of Tony Elliott, Carol Sturridge, and Izeth Ray. This council tonight can attempt to adopt an alternate agenda, and we're going to be told it violates the Brown Act, but this council must try to do that and not succumb to this nonsense. Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Yasmina
Porter, who will be representing the Tannery Leadership Group.
You'll be given 4 minutes for that.
Thank you, everyone. I think I'm speaking mostly to the vice mayor because you're the only person I haven't really we haven't gotten a chance to work with. I want to just say that I'm here on behalf of the tannery community that includes a lot of businesses and families, the Arts Council, John Stewart Company. And first I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Linda.
Hi, thank you. My name is Linda Cover. I live and work at the Tannery Art Center. I'd like to stress the support that we have for your proposed initiative to manage the camps and disband the Ross camps. In addition, and you already have done this, is made it possible for the walkway to be used by pushing back the porta potties and places where people are hanging out so people can walk by. That's a good thing. As the city did last year at the River Street camp, when it was active, we got security for our Tannery campus. We are requesting that again, just like you did last year. That's why the River Street camp was worthwhile. The last, was that?
You're
good.
You're good. I'm just going to ask if everybody who's here to support what you're going to vote on today, if you could please stand. So the proposal by that you guys prepared, that we read back.
Going to provide shelter?
And if you could raise your hand as well. Some of you are already standing, so we don't know. Thank you. You can sit down. So I'm almost on the verge of tears because I got a paper that called tannery people, they call us names, some kind of name. Anyway, one of the things that really is missing that I noticed is actually talking to the people in the camp, which I did and we have been doing, and some of them are here. I didn't see anybody else but me that has been going out and talking to people in the camp and bringing them here. So the one thing that I would like to say is, if possible, I would like you to adapt the proposal as is, but adding that they should be offered gift cards or Safeway cards to the people that are voluntarily moving. And I also want to state, for misinformation that people have been putting out, the Supreme Court said that people have a right to sleep. You cannot make them move if you don't have a place for them to go. So don't not vote for it just in case they don't find a place. If they don't find a place, they can't make them go. That's the law.
Was that our time? Okay, I just wanted to reiterate that we really, as a campus, we support what you're trying to do and get housing for people, and something decent that gets people in a place that works as part of their community too.
Since we still have time, I want to also share that when I was at the County Board of Supervisors today, they said that this, first of all, this is really, really, really important to everybody in this room because there's funding right now from the state. And if they don't vote for something, that money just gets taken away. That's what happens. So what I'm hoping is that you're going to vote yes for what's on the table and then get back in there and put more in it than what Chris Cron and Drew Glover are talking about. That's what I'm hoping, that you're not going to just fight amongst each other and then do nothing for the homeless people. Because they are my friends and I have been homeless and he's been homeless. So I hope you'll take action, you have the money to take action, and what I heard from the County Board of Supervisors today is that we were the first community, the Tannery and Felker Street community, to say, put it in our neighborhood. We're not saying move it away, we're saying take good care of them and do it right. And now you have the money, so make it happen.
Well, if I still have time, I'm still going to say this, that I support you going forward. just go forward. Please keep in mind you're going to need a lot of housing. And I appreciate you trying to do this, finally. And we're not the NIMBYs.
Speaker is representing Conscious in Action, and that's Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. As you can imagine, having just heard this report, it's kind of taken some of the hot air out of my presentation that I worked on all afternoon. And I want to really make an ego decision that I won't give a bunch of emotional hyperbole. And I want to do it, Martine, for this reason. I thought what you said was really important when you made your introductory comment about your relationships. Your relationships cannot be separated from us, the community. And I think that's one of my biggest bones of contention, Martin, with the way this has happened, is that we activists, and as Serene just pointed out, a lot of homeless people have not been a part of this decision making. And therefore we have felt alienated and not involved. And I think that's what causes some of the emotion, accusation that it's not healthy. I want to say to you, I'm a rabbi, change the commandment. Instead of saying, love your neighbor as yourself, say, love your fellow council person as yourself, with respect and the caring that you want to have from each other. But in doing that, invite those of us who are activists and who have worked hard on this to be a part of the process. And I particularly want you to know how grateful I am to Chris and to Drew for all the work that they put into their proposals. But Chris and Drew, because of what I just heard, I'm not sure, I want to think about this process, but especially because I'm hoping that you will make the effort, first of all, to treat each other with respect and kindness. I'm the father of a son who was on this council and who came home and cried too many times. So I know what it means for you to respect and love each other. Lastly, include us. Make us feel that we're a part of this process so that we don't feel alienated. And then, hopefully, in consultation with Chris and Drew and Sandy, I can come back in a couple of weeks and say, well, it's going forward. So thank you for allowing me the 4 minutes.
Casa de Aprendizaje Preschool, and that's Pedro Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor Gaquins and City Council. My name is Pedro Castillo, and this is my wife.
Adriana Castillo.
We just want to let you know that we're a compassionate people, and then we really understand that you have a real hard decision to make, and then there's a big problem that we face on our city. And I'm here not just to talk about ourselves, but also to talk on behalf of the families. My wife has a home daycare that she's been running for over 12 years. And then she provides services for children, and not just for children, also for the families. She provides classes for parents, and then we have this disturbing for the parents when it's time to drop off their children. They've been having encounters multiple times on the day, sometimes during pickup or drop off. My wife has to get up early in the morning and do cleaning on the street. I just wanted to give you a brief picture where our daycare is located. We're located on Baker Street at the end of the cul-de-sac near the levee. So we're right by the pedestrian bridge crossing, and then so on the one side we have the homeless shelter, and on the other side of the street we have the M-Line services, and also there is the food and the liquor store. So what happened is this is not new. This has been going for a long time. Our street has become a highway for people to walk from the homeless shelters to the M-Line services to the liquor store or to get food. And then so we've been impacting ourselves also our neighborhood, our community. And the parents been seeing this, and then there is parents that when they go and visit the program, they see the street and they get afraid, they get scared. And then so there is kids that been lost to, or they've been missing to have a education that my wife provides, because some of the parents, they get afraid of what's going on the street. What really here is we're asking for your help, and then to help the families that my wife provides service to. What we actually need from you is, there's a lot of things that we need, but if we can get some help, while these things that they move over and everything. I just want to mention that we really support, what you expect when you work for, and also we support that the people needing housing, they really support that they should have good housing and place to stay. Nobody should be living on the street. We really approve that and then we do that. So what we'd like to have is some street pick up trash on the street. To have more police present is that approved. Right across from our school, there is a program, day and night storage, and then it's being conflicting with our daycare, so we're asking if it can be relocated.
My name is Scott Imsland, and I live on Price Street, and then I had to come up from Felker and have a comment, and I came with a few people here from Price Street, and we feel the spillover from the homeless camp and the bridge and all the traffic that comes through, and I just want to support the police presence that happens specifically on Felker and Price Street in our area. It's really super helpful. I thank them, and our neighbors always thank the police for coming upon our calls and just having a presence through the Denny's parking lot, through the hotel's parking lot. There's a lot of activity that goes on, and I'm sure you're aware of it, and the police are aware of it, and I talk to them, and I have friends in the police department that I surf with, and they're great guys. They understand the problems in that area. And I just want to, the security patrols that were a private company that came through our area had a huge impact on drug dealing and what trafficking goes on in that area. If you live in the area, you see it firsthand. And knowing people in the fire department, the police department, and also old city council members and mayors, they know exactly what's going on down there. And I'm coming from a side that won't be necessarily what's in this house tonight, but I see the negative aspect of the camps and all the bikes that have been stolen from my family, and all the neighbors, all the cars that have been stolen, personally, 3 broken into. Thank God the police department found them all within 24 hours and got them back actually in great shape. They weren't destroyed. And that was really, the police department did a fantastic job in highway patrol. So, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Bless you.
First of all, I'm very angry. I'm going to try my hardest to channel Sherry Campbell's energy. She was always very respectful, so I'm going to try to, please, Sherry, help me. October 10th, 2017, Not all of you were there, just Cynthia, I believe, was on the council, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys had said within 0 to 3 years, you were going to do a number of things. Secure storage. I'm just going to go through a few of them. Secure storage. That would have been easy to do. Don't tell me, oh, Brent Adams is fulfilling that. He is, but it wasn't from your help. He did it on his own, not because of you guys. And thankfully, he did that, so I'm happy. But it wasn't because of you. Restrooms and showers. Where are the showers? There are some restrooms over by the camp. Navigation centers you were going to talk about. You were going to talk about secure electronic device charging resources. No place like home. I could go on and on. Recovery center for crisis. None of these were done. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one that was done. Homeward bound. Yes, you've been able to get that one easily where you can send people home. So, what about all the people that are living there that have pets? Are you sure the places are going to supply that? Are you sure that what about people that have partners, families? Are they going to be able to live in those places? What about people that have drug abuse, that are addicted to drugs, that are addicted to alcohol? Are they going to be able to go to the Salvation Army, to the other places? No, you are not going to be able to move those people over straight away. Please do not end the campground, please.
Hello, my name is Vicki Winters. I've been going out to the camp with my fellow members of the Democratic Socialists of America Mutual Aid Solidarity Group. And we went to the camp this afternoon and talked to folks, mentioned what was on the proposal for the city council. I don't know any of the, I don't see any of the people we talked to here, but they wanted us to pass on these messages. The council should come out here and live for a couple of weeks. During severe storms, there should be a way people can stay in hotels. When we mentioned that you're discussing $10 million in funding for homeless, they said it could build an apartment complex, but it will go in someone's pocket and they'll keep shifting us around. You don't want to move every few months, but they keep shifting us around, shifting us around. One man who said he was a builder said that you should have a tiny home village on city land. He said, that's a battle I'd be willing to fight. People just said, treat us as human beings, not animals. We're human beings. They should respect our privacy and not rip up tents. When I mentioned people who are familiar with the Laurel Street shelter, when I mentioned that River Street shelter, mentioned it might be opening, they just rolled their eyes. So that was an expensive thing that did not do much good at all. And then had a long chat with someone named Justin, coincidentally, who's identified as a veteran. And he said that in his mind, the value of Ross Camp was that he could spend a few hours every day not focused on basic survival needs. He knew where he would sleep at night, he knew where he would go to the bathroom, and that freed him up to be able to access veterans resources at the library and look beyond basic survival. We talked about these kinds of encampments they have in Eugene, where there might be a communal meeting space, and he was really excited by the idea of communally preparing food and participating in decision making. So in my mind, I think we need new creative solutions, and it looks like you're more on the old way of doing things.
My name is Ursula Reed, and after listening to the committee's recommendations, good? I don't think so. Simply because my understanding from the Ross camp, there are 200 tents out there, if not probably more going in. Not only that, there are not just one people in most of the tents. There may be a few, but most of them have 2 or 3 or maybe more. So 150 serving just 150 people is not going to work. And the thing of compassion and empathy, if you really want compassion and empathy, put yourself in their place. If even one person winds up out on the street because this camp has gone down, then you're doing a disservice. It could be you. Think about it. It could be you. Don't do it. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Mike Dealey. I would like to start by offering a quote, I believe, from Senator Bernie Sanders. Poverty exists not because we cannot feed the poor, but because we cannot satisfy the rich. That, unfortunately, is true here. We saw it with Measure M, where homeowners went against those who are most vulnerable. Some people, elders who I spoke to, terrified because they worked their whole life looking at the end of their life on the streets, maybe prior to that. Tonight, I want you to consider, and I want all of us to consider, that we are living in an economic storm that has been waged against the working class and the poor for decades. So this is a formidable obstacle, not an excuse to say it is out of our hands and above our heads. We have to do something, but we have to also recognize this obstacle. Homelessness, I say they are economic refugees. And we need to think from that point of view, not how they're draining the system, but how the system has been drained, all of us, of our hours of work, just to live, just to put food. Here we live in a breadbasket of the world, and we have children going hungry. We bailed out the banks for $5 trillion in a matter of days at 0% interest. But we can't loan that money to our own Americans. We have more homes empty and owned by banks than homeless people in America. Now, how can we look at this from a micro, from our own perspective as city residents? Well, we have a police department, but is that their job to manage the homeless? I'm not disrespecting those who serve in our force, but I do question the function of that office and our park ranger's office. How much are we spending on gas for them to be rolling on their cars on our bike path? How much is that gas? Do we have the budget? I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Lanford Brown, I'm back again. This time, this is really serious. We have to bring back 1220 River Street. We have to be able to get people out of the campground. And I know this from experience. I've worked at Salvation Army.
Excuse me, if you pause the time.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. We'll go ahead and start the time, and then it will allow you to speak, and please, if you can, speak into the microphone. And we'll
Okay. I've worked at the Salvation Army. I've worked at all of the homeless programs at the Armory. I would pack it full by myself overnight, 115 homeless people a night. I've housed people for 20 years of my life, senior mortgage loan officer for Chase. Right now, I got my 90-day notice. That's what landlords do. I'm facing homelessness. I was homeless for 7 months with a handicapped husband in a wheelchair and my 13-year-old daughter now. I live at 155 Felker Street. I support 100% what the city does. I trust you guys. I was assistant manager of the 1220 River Street program. I helped implement the Hold Harmless agreement. It is a program that works 100%. I was at the forefront of pulling the people out of San Lorenzo. You cannot put them in an extremely high barrier place that isn't increasing the beds that we've normally had, because when we had the Armory open, I could throw 115 people in there easy. Same funds from the emergency shelter program from HUD. Why can't we just open it up again? There are people all over the place who can do it. We have to run by the same policies. You guys can do it, and it works. But right now, Justin, you said finding people housing. I help people get into housing. They're in that camp now. The reason why they're not being evicted, they follow the rules and they're scared. Landlords put them on month-to-month leases, and then when they decide, they're out.
this time, so I'm just going to be off the cuff. I just wanted to bring up a couple issues with the plan that I see, and that is that if Smart Path is your primary way that you are assessing people into housing, it's an ineffective program. I'm a Smart Path assessor myself. I have not seen people housed through that program. And also, it does not include race or LGBT status in factoring in people's vulnerability, which is a big factor on people's vulnerability in the streets. That should be completely rectified. I've brought it up multiple times to other people involved in that, and nothing has changed. I don't think that it's an effective program, and I also want to bring up the deterrence-focused initiative, or however it was rebranded. The focused intervention team, that's it. I don't think that the city, I know that it's a county program, but I do not think that the city should support it or work with it. It's basically a program to criminalize homelessness, and specifically people that are homeless that have mental health issues, and people that are homeless that have mental health issues that don't want treatment that has traumatized them. Like, they should not be forced into treatment, and it's a program to offer a carrot of housing that doesn't actually exist, and saying that if people don't follow the program, that they'll be penalized more heavily. It's really a terrible program, and I'd say this also to the community, like, this is really, you should be active about not allowing this to happen. Yeah, it's really, really terrible, and there really is no housing, and, you know, commercial lots are erected, like, things are commercial lots that could be residential lots. There are spaces for housing, but I guess a commercial lot is more revenue, so that is prioritized. Lots should be prioritized for housing, and don't dissolve the camp.
You're here.
Good morning, mate. Oh, good afternoon, evening. Sorry, I was done a minute ago. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I just want to point out how great this conversation feels as opposed to a conversation about RV laws and blue boxes on the Pacific, and this feels like a solution-oriented conversation. I'd also like to point out that this year we are not facing a hepatitis A outbreak because of hand washing in facilities. And I'd also like to point out that the Caltrans property there there's always been some tents there. And I know there was some concentrated efforts along Coral Street and Lime Kiln to move people along because that was impacting businesses there. So sometimes I think what we're seeing now is sort of right now there's no tents along Highway 1, like if you're headed up towards Mission. They were there years ago, so I think people have kind of coagulated there. So it seems so huge, but a year ago it was much more dispersed. And I also want to point out another wonderful, beautiful humanitarian thing that is happening at that encampment. I go down there a couple times a week and I remove used syringes, and I also give out anywhere from 15 to 40 boxes of Narcan twice a week. It's getting used up. Sometimes one woman, 2 people in one morning, and I don't know if, of course you remember, but at the Benchlands campground there were 2 fatal overdoses in a very short period of time. I haven't got the report from the coroner thus far. She'll have it in a few weeks, but every day there's not a fatal overdose at that encampment. It's a miracle because there's about a couple hundred people there, and that's from a community that's doing a lot of outreach, HPHP, and the people are empowering themselves to take care of their community and saving lives. It has nothing to do with not wanting to wait for 911, and thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Amy Dichuk and I'm a social worker with the county. My primary concern with the Ross encampment being shut down is where are folks going to go? And I realize that there are these shelter plans available, and I think that's great that we have plans in place. My concern is, the reality is we have a lot of folks that have mental health issues and substance use issues, which is going to impact their ability to fit into the rules and regulations of the shelter programs that are available. As a society, I think we need to decide, is housing a human right? If If you have mental health issues, are we still gonna house you? If you have substance use issues, are we gonna house you? The reality is, even if folks wanna address their substance use, we have wait lists at Janus Detox. Are we gonna get all these people in? It's not a reality if, we have, I don't know the percentage of folks at the Ross encampment who would want substance use services, but we couldn't get all those people in a timely manner. So we need to come up with solutions for that. The second thing I wanted to address was the proposal for all this funding that's coming down. That's awesome. $10 million is a lot of money. My concern is that, as we've seen with the Section 8 program, I meet hundreds of families who have Section 8 vouchers. They've had them for months, years. They can't find housing, so it just turns into a lousy piece of paper. And I'm concerned that these rental assistance programs are going to turn into the same thing. There's money available, but there's no housing for these folks, so we need to build affordable housing. Thank you.
Hello again, my name is Elliot, for those of you who did not catch that before. I don't have any specific policy suggestions or anything, just some concerns. One of them being that it strikes me as upsetting that suddenly we're all so concerned about homeless people just because they got together to do something for themselves instead of that these same people have been homeless in this city for years and years and years.
Can't hear you.
People have been homeless for a while and we're only upset about it because they're organizing themselves. And that's concerning to me. Also, it concerns me that one of your solutions is to bring in more law enforcement when things that are considered crimes in this town include things like sitting within 14 feet of a building, which is something that people who live in houses do all the time and don't get cited for. So, anyway, also, I know I have limited time, but I wanted to point out that I also have concerns with some of your behavior, Mayor Watkins, and I'm also a woman, so I'm pretty sure it's not internalized misogyny, it's just your behavior.
Good evening, I'm Scott Graham. One of the problems that I see is that none of these places that people go to, these service centers, like the Salvation Army and these other places, none of them work for real people. You have to line up at 4 o'clock, get on a bus, go there, and then get kicked out at 5 in the morning. Now, somebody that's homeless can find themselves a part-time job, and that part-time job goes from 6 to midnight. How are they going to go to one of these places? It doesn't work. Right now, the people at the Ross encampment have free will. They can go to their tent. They can come and go as they please. Homeless people that I've talked to, when they had the Boneyard campground, they called it a concentration camp. And that's the way most of these services are run. These are human beings. These are not cattle. They are not criminals. You have to treat them as humans. They have to have free will. So you have to come up with a solution that treats people like a human being instead of like a cattle, like a criminal. And it's like most of these places work like the work release program at the jail. That's not a human thing. That's something for criminals. That's something for animals. These are humans. Show some compassion. Come up with a program that works for a human with free will. Thank you.
Mayor, City Council, there was a bomb drop at the beginning here. I wish we had a little conflict resolution about what happened, the letter that the mayor read about some of the behaviors. What I see is just maybe software council behavior, somebody issuing something too soon and not having the process. But I really wish we had a clear hearing of what you wanted to present. I hope you get time, maybe in a coming council meetings beyond, maybe tonight. I really, I have a lot of respect for what the city's doing. It's taking on a really big dragon, and yet we're talking about this encampment. Here we are again. It's the same time this year that we were last year. We're talking about an encampment. We're not. I operate the warming center, and we're just proving that there's a completely different subset of population, 80, 100, 150 people downtown that aren't even part of this camp. We're not even addressing that. They're not making it into the winter shelter. I want to talk about homelessness in Santa Cruz as a community. We should wrap our hands around this problem, not say why are they here, how do we make them go away, but this is a reflection of us. If we were going to take better care of ourselves, what would that look like? 10 million, 10 million, whatever, money comes and goes, all the millions we ever spent, this problem just keeps getting bigger. Let's pretend we don't have any money. Then what we would do. We have to be way more inventive. And I've been trying to talk about transitional encampments to this body for years. I still haven't had a hearing with the city manager's office. There's a reason I can't do that right now, but I do actually want, if we're going to go ahead with an encampment like this, well, I mean, in the 20 recommendations, we said we would never do a declaration of emergency. We wouldn't do any encampments. Here's our second renegade drug camp, and here's going to be our second police-oriented encampment. We're not going to try transitional encampments that show data-rich all over the Northwest. There are dozens and dozens of these. I've seen them, but here we are, flying with blinders. I just said, let's get real and do transitional encampments then.
Good evening, Mayor Watkins and members of the City Council. My name is Jim Brown and I'm the Arts Council Deputy Director and Tannery Director. I was hired more than a year ago to help the Tannery Arts Center live up to its promise as a thriving arts community. The arts are a force for good here in Santa Cruz, and I'm privileged to have the opportunity to work with these folks. However, art and creativity can only thrive in a safe space. Tonight, some people have spoken about the challenges neighbors face with the unmanaged encampment on the Santa Rosa River. Some have spoken about the challenges and needs of the people living in the camp. Both of these are worthy concerns and valid for the council to be considering. The City-County Joint Action Plan on the table for this meeting is a valiant attempt by city staff and the council members and the supervisors who participated to craft a middle way that addresses the health and safety concerns of the camp neighbors with the genuine needs of the people living in the camp. Expanded shelter beds, reopening the successful river camp, and connecting those in need with services. While it is not a perfect solution, it is a step in the right direction. And in my view, it's a step that could have been taken months ago and prevented the crisis that we're in now. In the interest of supporting the Tannery Arts Center as a safe and vibrant home for the arts, and in the interest of making real progress on one of the community's most contentious issues, I urge you to support the action plan presented by staff and unanimously approve the plan that the county supervisors approved today. And I would ask that you amend the plan to include the additional security resources that the county supervisor approved. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Serge Gagnon. I would like to very much state my appreciation. I'd very much like to state my appreciation for everybody who's sitting down trying to solve the problem. I mean, there are a lot of really smart people who are really dedicated and really trying to do the best that they can. I do this work because I enjoy connecting with people, and sometimes coming to these kind of things feels like there's a lot of headbutting and stuff. And, for myself, I want to say thank you. For the two parts of the recommendation, I like the idea of more services, and that there's a second part of it of closing the shelter on a certain date. So the idea is we're maybe going to have a bunch of programs that are going to happen at that time. There's a phased rollout thing. I mean, you know the problem. The phased rollout of when the beds are going to be available, definitely going to stop it at March 15th. So there's not going to be beds for people. And to count the VFW of continuing that contract on 7th Avenue, April 15th, as 60 of the beds of 100. Well, those people are actually going to be on the street too and are going to need beds. So that's not, yes, it's more than would have been otherwise, but it's not going to be putting beds for all the people that are at the Ross camp. The Ross camp, for me, I think Rabbi Posner said it, that we all just want to have a voice. with Mayor Watkins, we're the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project. The Youth Voice is actually federally mandated that they get to choose which programs get to move forward to get voted on. But we're not mandated for that for adults, so we just don't do it. There is no adult committee of homeless people that get to actually say, well, you guys want to do more of the rotating shelter, but we need bus passes to be able to do that program. So I'd like to ask for adult voice, but also for the Homeless Action Partnership General Board to be allowed to.
Hello, Council, members of the community. My name is Augur Shkild. I'm a tenant advocate in this community. I want to speak to one aspect of the council, the recommended action for council about Part C of Section 1. I read that and it's pretty upsetting to me to read that can't describe the term abatement as though people are roaches or rats or termites or pests. It's pretty dehumanizing language, and I think the basis of any kind of action that this body takes, this city takes, is based in the language that it uses. So that's pretty disgusting. As someone who follows how programs like a navigation center worked in the Bay Area, they're a joke. And part of the reason they're a joke is there is no housing for people to be navigated to. So if you close this camp, if the council decides to close this camp in 30 days, like the social worker from the county said, many of the people there will not be able to use their vouchers in order to find housing. Like some of the other folks who have spoken before me said, people who are addicted to different kinds of substances, which makes them ineligible for other kinds of shelter programs. People who have pets that they stick with all the time, because that's the one thing holding their sanity together. People who have partners and they're not allowed to live in a shelter with their partner will not go into the shelters. And those people are going to go onto the street, into illegal encampments. It's really upsetting that some of the proposals that 3 council members put forward around examining how laws in Santa Cruz criminalize houseless people, especially, for example, the one that Elliot said about 14 feet being a criminalizable offense for sitting next to a building. Most of you weren't on the council several years ago when ex-police chief Vogel talked about what percentage of tickets are paid. I think over 90% of tickets don't get paid. They go to collections and they tank your credit, and they mean you can't get into housing.
Hi, my name's Nita Hertel, and I'm here to, for one thing, say, what about, you started out with a number of like 900 people estimated in the city that are homeless, and then you start talking about the 150 that are living at this encampment. And I second what this person said a while back. The only reason we're looking at that camp is because it's an eyesore and it's visible. And people don't like to see that. People are driving by, coming through town saying, oh my God, there's a letter to the editor saying, I used to live in Santa Cruz. What happened to Santa Cruz? Well, I just came back from Portland, Oregon. There's a lot more people up there that are homeless, that are on the street, but there also are solutions that the city itself are supporting, like Dignity Village, which has been in existence for I don't know how many years. And they allow people their own little structures that they can put in a designated parking lot, parking area. They've been there for years, and it's a stable community. This is a community. And like Zav said, these are not rats. These are our citizens. They're residents, they live in our town. You may want them to go away, and you want that camp to go away because it's an eyesore. It's in a shopping area. There's a lot of traffic that goes by. Well, these are human beings. Do you think they want to be there? I was listening to the hail come down the other night, and all I could think of was, how are those people surviving? How are they living through this? And how do you not go mentally ill? And how do you not become a criminal if you are pushed against the wall and you live in a community where there is no support? I know you're doing what you think you are, you're doing your best effort, but I want you to have some imagination. And go and look at other places. See what they're doing. Talk to other communities. Talk to other city councils. Talk to the city council in Portland. They passed rent control.
Larger
And this has been a problem, you know, I've had people living on the river since then. And I'm gonna say for me, for the last year or so, I've been living with my head in the sand, just kind of ignoring it. And I pulled it out yesterday, looked in the Sentinel and saw that the county meeting was today at 9, and I went to it, and I'm encouraged. I want to know who I write to the state to thank that gave us $10 million to address this. Yeah, should I write Gavin? I mean, where did we get the money? I'm thankful, really I'm thankful, and I'm thankful for the hard work this woman did putting together the summary from that meeting today, and the 2 women that are heading the council to figure out how to spend this money. And my request is that we try to figure out a blueprint that we, like many of the people I hear say, include them in the conversation. Go to them and say, how can we do this? What do you need? And I think, I got 50 seconds, I'll see if I can kick it out. When I went to Australia, and she heard this story, I went to Australia, my friend and I drove about 3,000 miles around, and I kept every now and then we'd see an abandoned Chinook, Winnebago, and I'm like, what's that all about? And he says, well, the government was, you know, upset about what they did to the Aboriginals. And so, to resolve it, they decided on their own to give their Aboriginals Chinooks, or Winnebagos, whatever they were. And the Aboriginals said, we didn't want these. Did you talk to us? And so that's why you see them like abandoned. And so I'm very thankful, bottom of my heart. This speaks to who we are, how we deal with this. So thank you.
Hi, Meeting Council. I'm Michael Gusser. Vicki Winters mentioned the visits that the DSA committee has been making to the camp the last few weeks. And I was with Vicki today. When we went to the camp, we thought it would be a good idea to let the residents know what was happening, because unless they read the Sentinel, of course, they wouldn't have been consulted about the closing of the camp or even informed that it was going to happen. Some of them knew, because some of them had read the paper, but most of them were not surprised, to my surprise, because they're used to this. Some of them are so cynical that they weren't interested at all in us reading what they had to say to the council, because they had no faith whatsoever in the process. They know better than anyone that the history of dealing with homelessness in Santa Cruz is a history of harassment. We all know that. I mean, I'm not an expert on this at all. People here are. People have already talked about this. This is a long history of spaces that are open and not being used, being closed off, places where it's illegal to park for arbitrary reasons which are clear if you just begin to think about it. They know what's going to happen. They know that even if there aren't enough spaces, or if there are and new people move in, what will happen to that little niche there where people could live and are actually living is that it will be fenced off like the other places, like the corners of the walkway across Highway 1 on High Street, not used for anything but arbitrarily fenced off, right? So that's what targeting homelessness in Santa Cruz is. And really there are cities and states and counties like Cumberland County, New Jersey, like the state of Utah, like Medicine Hat, Alberta, that have realized that this is serious. And two things, it's not just an issue of, it's not just a humanitarian issue, it's cost effective to have long-term permanent solutions like Housing First, like the transitional encampments that Brent talked about. This involves radical solutions. I mean, fine, this is a tiny beginning, but don't close the camp.
My name is Marcos Negon. I represent the Grant Park neighbors. It's about 1,000 addresses east of Ocean Street and some of the businesses along Ocean Street. And we're growing pretty rapidly out of necessity. It started off at the park, needing to keep our park safe, clean, so we have our families there, see our kids off to school, that kind of thing. And personally, I've lived in Santa Cruz for about 30 years as a resident and Santa Cruz County foster parent. So I know a thing or two about helping hand to mouth, about compassion. I'm really glad that the neighbors and I have figured out how we can effectively work with the city, work with Parks and Rec to keep our park clean and safe. And just here to represent them and tell you that the decisions that you make affect us as residents. And I'm glad that you're putting attention to it. That's about it. Thank you.
I lost my pen. It's a really good pen. I need it back. Okay, hi, my name's Elise Caspi, and I'm a longtime activist and investigator of homeless issues. I also became homeless due to domestic violence issues in my life, and I hope not to talk about that too much, but I do want to start with one metaphor that was extremely helpful to me. When you are getting battered, especially the psychological side of battering is about confusion. You're extremely confused. You love this person, they're telling you they love you, and then they hurt you. It's so confusing, especially if you're not getting hit. So I just want to say, Patricia Evans' book called, I forget what it's called, darn. It was so clarifying for me. There's about 5 books that I would recommend to everybody to read if you were ever battered or you're somebody who's recovering from domestic violence. The reason I'm bringing this in is for a victim like myself, there's 2 boxes. There's the box that your oppressor is in. And they're telling you, hey, things are okay, I'm trying to work with you, but then they're harming you and things don't feel right and it's not going well. And then there's the box you're in, right? You want to believe them. You're confused. You're smart. You're trying to figure it out. You're not getting the help you need. There's finally a little bit of help from some people saying, you know, your batter is in another box. Their reality is different than yours. And you start to validate your own feelings and activities. And this is what's happening to homeless people in our society in this city. Carl Rove's strategy was, in a nutshell, he taught a lot of people how to lie. And there's a lot of lies going around this community. Phil Kramer writing an editorial for the Sentinel stating that he housed 296 people. I'm sorry, I want to see the evidence on that. The money we've put into rangers, the money we've put into harassment, people sitting in this council, people sitting in this staff are oppressing homeless people. And I say we need a new body to give us new solutions. Thanks a lot.
Hi, my name's Brooke Butler. I've lived in Santa Cruz since 1984. The first decade I was a renter, and since then I've owned my home for 20 years. I'm one of the lucky ones. And I haven't really concerned myself very much with this, except, you know, incidentally, as I go around town, I do notice the difference, and it is bleeding over into the neighborhoods in a way that is an impact in the last couple of years. I am encouraged that you guys have done such a thorough report and that there's efforts being made to do something, hopefully on a more long-term basis. I think anything temporary is just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. And I'd like to see some more creative thought as far as every time we talk about a tent city, I'm thinking tents are not any protection from the elements. These people are freezing cold and in the mud, and even in a parking lot, I can't imagine the level of discomfort on top of the desperation, and that we can do better. And if we're spending $90,000 a month, and that's somehow not enough, I'd like to know. I mean, it's going to take more time than we have tonight, but I sure would be interested in seeing how that money got spent and why it was so expensive to put up 50 tents. I keep thinking back to the days after the earthquake. That first year after the earthquake, we had pavilions downtown that housed all the businesses that were displaced, and the people of Santa Cruz supported those businesses 100%, shopping every day in those pavilions, and it was a beautiful solution. And I know FEMA paid for those, but I'm curious to know if that's something that we could come up with using some of this money to buy a bigger space.
Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Cool. I know a lot of people at the Ross camp,
I seen a little show of hands earlier, and I actually wish that I could do that right now and ask how many of those people would like to go and live at a shelter versus staying at a camp or at the Ross camp itself. So I have a couple of suggestions. Although offering shelter beds are great, and we should always have those available, because we know that that's not going to work for everybody, I mean, for all the reasons that have been discussed. Pets, displacement, all those things. I don't need to go over all those things again. But because we know that a lot of people will not leave the Ross camp perhaps, and that won't work for them, offer the shelter beds, see what happens. Put off any closure or talk of closing the Ross camp. See what you can do by offering those shelter beds, and see what happens. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, continue to work on the proposals that we worked with Conscience and Action and have Drew and Chris, the interns, put forth those proposals, because those proposals address a broader spectrum of issues. And if you close the Ross camp without addressing and putting forth those proposals, all you're going to do is put those people back into the community, back under a bush. It doesn't do anything for any of us, the homeless or the community, if you don't address all of the issues. So I say don't close the Ross camp, but offer the shelter beds and see what happens.
All right, my name is Trejon Spinner, and I'm not from California, and I really don't know the statistics about what's going on here, but I'm pro, for people that don't have places to go, because I also, for a few years, I stayed on the streets. I don't feel like you should exile those folks. Or us, we should have places for the people. It's a lot of people that's lost causes, but it's a lot of us who also want to do better for ourselves. We just need that extra help or that extra push. So I feel like we should have places to help those people get to those places, and don't, exile them. And that's all that I have right now.
Thanks for having this issue discussed in the community. On Sunday, just as we were done, I had run out of food. A woman comes, she's in her 60s or so, and she's all bundled up. And fortunately, somebody had donated a blanket so she could wrap herself in that. And she goes, is there a shelter? I just can't sleep outside again another night. And so, we mentioned the Homeless Service Center. She said she'd gone there, but there was no room there. And so I called Mel to see if I could find, the Face Community Shelter. I called Brent Adams' number, and they didn't have a warming center. It was bitter cold. It was terrible. And it's just heartbreaking to just look into the eyes of that woman and say, man, there is nothing I can do. I want to bring you home. I'd like to bring you home, but I can't, because I don't have control of my home. So, this is heartbreaking. And people have said some amazing things. I was going to say what Abby Samuels said. She pointed out exactly, more eloquently than I could, this whole idea of having this study that grew out of 2 years of us sleeping on the sidewalk in solidarity. But we got to go home and take a shower. These other hundreds of people, they don't. And it's just heartbreaking that we don't take this. We've been up here for years. We talked about building SROs back at the time of the earthquake in preparation for this day when there would be so many people living on our streets. These are economic and political refugees. They're internally displaced people. I think the city council should ask the UN to drop food aid in here and start solving this problem.
Hi, my name is Laura Egan. I'm the programs director at the Coastal Watershed Council, and I'm here today to ask you to approve this plan. The Coastal Watershed Council works to inspire people to explore, enhance, and protect the Lower San Lorenzo River. I want to acknowledge the council and the city staff who have worked so hard for the progress that has been made to date. Today, I urge you to hear the concerns of the people who live along the Lower San Lorenzo River regarding the management both inside and outside of the camp. I want to acknowledge you and urge you to continue your effective collaboration with the County of Santa Cruz and to continue to communicate publicly about these efforts. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Schulman. I'm the producer of the BTS Presents show. Last year we did a series of shows on real estate behind the scenes in Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley. This year we're working on shows about the Community Cafe, which is the subject of community discussions. Hi, Mayor. So I just wanted to let you know that a few years ago in 2014 there was a mayor's challenge nationally for ending veteran homelessness. At that time I did a television show on ending veteran homelessness in Santa Cruz that Mayor Don Lane had taken his oath as mayor to fulfill on completing ending veteran homelessness by the end of the year. At that time, there's a point-in-time count of the homeless people in Santa Cruz County, and it was 3,500. So today, when it's brought to my attention from the presentation today that we're down to 1,200 as a point-in-time count, I think it does not occur that there is an emergency, and therefore I think the consideration for taking action today is relevant, but I don't think that we should declare an emergency.
Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members, and staff. My name is Ari. I was born in 1995, and I've been a resident in Santa Cruz County since. When I was 17 years old, my mother terminated my residence at her household. My mother terminated my residence at her household when I was 17, and I've been homeless since then, on and off. During this whole time, I've held employment. I just got done working at Woodstocks for 2.5 years. I actually have a member in the behind me who is my coworker who had no idea I was homeless until this point. I mostly lived in my car for the last year, and that got me in trouble with the law enforcement for purely sleeping in my car, and I would do my best not to be in neighborhoods and still got in trouble. And it made it almost impossible for me to keep holding employment at my job. And also, there's something that I haven't heard brought up once tonight, and Santa Cruz is a big location for transients because it's warmer than all the other locations. Especially in the winter time, we have more homeless people come to Santa Cruz to find shelter and refuge, probably than any other town in California because of the weather. And being homeless for the time I have, there's so many more homeless people than we can even account for. I would estimate numbers 3,000 to 4,000 easily. I went to Tent City for the first time today because someone stole my phone, and I located it there and had the chance to talk to everybody there and meet them, and met amazing people. People who offered me phones, offered me food, and gave me clothes while they're in worse conditions than I am. And the big thing I think too about them is there's a lot of drug issues there that really aren't being thought of. And for a lot of these people, if they were just to be sent to a shelter, problems would keep pursuing and they wouldn't get the full benefit they need. A lot of these people need help if they want it. And there needs to be more communication, I feel like, with the people that are actually homeless to see what is needed, because these resources wouldn't help me being homeless. I need more job opportunities and I need more food opportunities. Thank you, Council.
I'm going to try to keep this short. It's getting awfully late. Thanks, you guys. I've met many of you. I really appreciate what you're trying to do. I'm out there in the audience, torn between the get rid of those people and how dare you even consider it. And frankly, I find that all just very upsetting that it's so divided and frankly so disrespectful. Like some of my friends back there are like, you're not cynical enough. Well, I'm not cynical enough. I think you're trying to do some really good stuff. Is it going to work? I think so. Is it perfect? No. I guess what I really want to say tonight is I would really hope that besides what you're looking at, we look at some things about how we define housing. I had a friend who is a retired teacher, very respectable person, was going to buy an old convalescent home, which would have housed like 20, 25 low-income people, and she couldn't do it because it only had 10 parking spaces instead of 15. I mean, come on. I think we have to get our planning stuff. I mean, maybe we're stuck with the Uniform Code Act, but maybe there are exceptions. I realize that's not where you are today, but I think part of what's going to help all of this is if we redefine what's housing in this county, because besides our huge suffering homeless population, how many of you have kids, grandkids who you will not see because they can't live here? So I think just put that into the mix while you're doing this, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.
Good evening, my name is Linda Weaver, and people having to live outside, that's cruel. Closing the River Street camp, it was cruel. And I very much want to be respectful for all the work that all of you are doing, and you are serving. But over the years, I have to be honest, my observations have been that this all looks to be kind of helter-skelter. But tonight, it was actually described as being lots of stall out. And that is what I think I have been observing over the years, is stall out. The only clear action proposed in that is the closing of the camp on March 15th. Everything else is about when feasible, which sounds like possible stall out. I see this as actually an opportunity. The campsite is an opportunity. You have 150 people who have gathered and have the possibility to become transformed community. So repurpose the Ross Camp to a transitional encampment based on the proven models in Seattle and in Eugene and other places as well. So delete C in your action. The unsheltered, and I know this from working with people, the unsheltered need consistent, long-term solutions. It is cruel and non-productive to not give them consistency in one place. Thank you. So they can regain their stability.
Dear God, please be up in this room with me and tell me what to say. Can I have permission to speak from my heart?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I love you, Mary. They might be not with you right now, but I love you. All that was just, all that stuff, that ain't right, what y'all did in front of us. I stayed down there 3 days at that camp. I built a little box shed for this woman and these 3 kids. Thank God the next day I found a place for this woman. And they took her out to Watsonville with them 3 little kids, y'all. That was sad, and I'm touched behind it. And I'm touched behind all them drug addicts, dope fiends down there. And I can talk like this because I was a dope fiend. But I got 33 years clean and sober. And I know there's help in this town. There's resources all over the place. If these folks wanted help, they would reach out and go get help. And I ain't got no pity party on nobody who don't. You talk about compassion. You talk about empathy. You talk about 150 people. You who got shelters here, take one person at a time. Take one of each of those and take them home. And have the patience to go eye to eye with them. Go ear to ear with them. And March them over to the AA program, the NA program. It's a lot of racism going on around here. And that's what I'm up against. I go to the Hopi Reservation, those people take me in and I don't even know my name. And they live in a box. All them folks have got open communication. And I look at you talk about empathy and love and compassion. Then let's take action and do that.
Council, Cynthia from Santa Cruz Tenants. I had to hear this litany of landlords talking about their threats to have a referendum or a recall, veiled threats, and kicking people out if there's any tenant protections passed. And it seemed like there's this. They don't like to have someone tell them what they can do with their property, but they're not really that concerned about their property values. As I know on Felker Street, someone just bought a small 4-unit building for over $1 million. It's 48 years old. The carpets haven't been changed in 48 years. They raised the rent $400 on each of the 4 families. They do things like cook for you and clean for you in your city. Are those people going to take advantage of the new little ordinance and move? No, they're trying to hang into their place. So this, I have empathy for the Castillo family. I do, because there's children and it's probably really an adjustment. But I have to say, if people are pressuring you and worried about their property values when homeless people are in their neighborhood, that's just bull. Because over $1 million, this guy bought the place sight unseen. Because I was there when he was inspecting it. And he told his tenants to lie to the bank and tell them that they pay $400 more a month so that he could get the loan. And then he raised their rent $400 from $1,400 to $1,800. So there's no problem with property values. And the sick thing is the landlords don't care. They just kick you out because they know even if there's a bunch of people who are homeless on the streets, they can still sell their crappy old place for over $1 million. So you figure that one out.
Hi, my name is Dennis Adler. I've been a resident here in Santa Cruz for about 30 years now. And I, like many others here in the audience, thought that we had a new city council that would address issues that had been avoided almost since I've been here, and longer still. But what I see is that the old way of doing things is being resurrected and being pushed through. I look up at this recommended city council action, and what I see is, simply put, the same old, same old.
Hi, my name is Luba Kaplanskaya. I am a student at UC Santa Cruz, and I just wanted to offer a suggestion. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I've been working with an organization called Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles for many years, and they just opened up a center called the Refresh Spot. The homeless problem in Los Angeles is also very big. There's over 64 blocks of individuals experiencing homelessness in the Skid Row population. And I recognize that funding is a huge issue, and I can't even fathom how much it costs to run a center such as the Refresh Spot and how people even receive funding. But I can vouch, as someone who has spent lots of time volunteering there and will be there this Friday, that the opportunity for individuals that are unhoused to take a shower and have access to restrooms, which is what the Refresh Spot is invaluable. I have seen people from the ground up being able to get jobs because they're able to get a shower and go to job interviews and get back up on their feet. It's a fantastic idea, and maybe that's something that could happen here in Santa Cruz. Again, the Refresh Spot, which I haven't mentioned, is like 7 trailers with fully equipped with showers and laundry laundry stations, and it's all free and it's open 24/7 with security, and there are electronic charging stations, and it's a very comfortable, safe spot for people to be. I recognize it's so expensive and I don't know how they do it. It's from Mayor Eric Garcetti, who I guess approved and granted permits for that, but it would be really great if we could have that here. I don't see anything like that, and I've seen it, again, like I've said, change people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. My name's Cherie Peterson, and once again, it seems like I've been addressing this for 7,000 years. The homeless, I've been homeless since way before I was born, it feels like, because I'm just tired of it. Today, crawling out of my van, I could only find 2 different shoes. Finding just clothes to wear is a problem. I go to Cabrillo, I make A's at Cabrillo. I'm not going to let it stop me that I've looked at over 2,000 apartments. I don't have a credit score because I don't believe in charging money I don't have. So therefore, I don't fit in. Just like the people that are drug addicts and have dogs or whatever people mention aren't going to fit in the shelter beds. The shelter beds, actually, I'm sure that you know, you have to go to Building K and be medicated with psychotropics to be in one of those shelter beds over there. You can't sign up and say, oh, I want to come in, I'm homeless. No. And then the other places over there are all running with meth and heroin. I don't know if you know that, but that's really true. I know people that have moved out of there because of the rampant drug abuse. It's appalling. And you're just not looking at it, not looking at us, the real people that are like, I almost died and right before my grandbaby turned 12 in September, and I was lucky my friend Kale rushed me to the hospital, or I wouldn't be standing here right now begging you to have temporary housing, to open that yellow building over there, to serve macaroni and cheese tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the homeless day. Get real, give us real solutions, not this crap. Oh, close the camp, close anything that works. What about us? What about us? Am I gonna die and there'll be nothing happening? You won't even have your shovel working, or no one will, the architect won't have any plans, because you'll plan to figure out that it doesn't matter, and that's appalling.
Hi, my name is Wes White. I'm from Salinas. I'm president of Salinas Homeless Union, also on this California Homeless Organizing Committee. Wanted to bring your attention, there's, first they came for the homeless is in Berkeley, and they're in between, they're on barred land, and they're in between jurisdictions, and what they do, they put a fence up, and now those same people are next to the road. So, you know, you have to be careful you're not putting people in worse harm's way. Sacramento is about to close the Stockton encampment, and it's between city and county property jurisdiction. Again, they put up a fence, they're going to drive people out. How are we actually helping people? I mean, people deserve food, clothing, and shelter. That's a basic human necessity. If it's just a piece of dirt or whatever, they deserve to be somewhere. You know, sign them up for the continuum of care. If you need to identify them, assess them, know who you're dealing with, separate the harmless from the homeless. That's what I need to see happen. You know, and that continuum of care is about the only thing you're going to be able to identify with, which is all dirty talk because it's about hungry hillbillies and money, mental illness and drug addiction. You don't think house people have mental illness or drug addiction? I mean, what we're doing is a drug addiction in itself. You're spending a whole lot of money hurting people, and human suffering is what's paying for it, so that we can feel good about ourselves. Are you kidding me? There needs to be spaces available. Martin versus Boise, public, private space, make a collaboration. You need warehouses, you need something. You need a place to put these people. If you take them out and there's nowhere for them to go, you're violating Martin versus Boise, which is constitutional, and you're being completely illegal. All these camping ordinances, they need to be stricken from the books. That's just the way it needs to be. You need to start dealing with people, treat people like people. You know, you treat them like little kids. What do we do with, oh, I don't want to deal with that brat, let's just get rid of them. You know, it's abusive. You're our city parents. You need to take care of your children better. You need a stricken C altogether. A is just pass out a piece of paper, and B is maybe we'll come up with stuff.
Thank you.
You need something.
I've been a resident of Santa Cruz County for 20 years now. And I also have had residency in Brookdale for up to 7 years. I've lost my Social Security and I've been homeless in Santa Cruz downtown for the last 10 to 11 years. And the only carpet I've been seeing laid down has been being pulled out from underneath me. And all of the weather that I've been seeing, I don't have any place to go anymore. There's no overhangs. There's no area where I can set up a tarp. There's no time period for me to be able to sleep anywhere. I have grand mal seizure epilepsy, and I've had over 6 seizures last year just because I've only had 2 to 3 hours of sleep every night. All I want to say is just become friendlier people. Don't rev your engines, slam your car doors in front of people that are sleeping next to you. They're just as afraid as you are. And they do not want to hurt you. They do not want to be hurt. I am more afraid of shuffling feet and people that are rattling my tarp when I'm sleeping in the rain than I am of police putting handcuffs on me and going to jail in the morning. So please have some love in your hearts, have some empathy, and have some sympathy.
Hello Council, my name is Alex Londos. I'm tired and I'm really not in the mood to talk to anybody here, but I felt there's a few things that I wanted to mention. So as we deal with global issues, the human population will continue to see more disasters related to climate change, like we saw with 15,000 houses burnt down in Paradise. We're going to continue to see more floods and people displaced because of climate change related disasters. We're going to continue to see the divide between the rich and the poor grow because of our capitalistic society, and AI replacing people, technologies, software, different computer programs, and we're going to continue to see more homeless people, not just in the US, but around the world. So I just got back from a long duration in Europe and I saw very few homeless people in there. Maybe it's the way their society is structured. So I'm mentioning all this because I haven't heard one mention of tiny homes throughout this entire talk. I think there's a lot of people that live in huge houses. They live outside of their means. They own things that they don't need and that don't serve a purpose. A lot of the people in our society in Santa Cruz, with the amount of money people make per capita, they see people that live in houses because that's how they want to live. But there's a lot of people that are in the homeless population that may be more minimalist than the average person. They may want to live in a smaller house, a smaller dwelling. I know that San Jose is starting to implement the tiny home village, as are other communities around the world. A lot of third world countries that I've been to, there's a lot of people living in shacks and shanties, and we don't offer, the size of houses has to be a certain size for people to live. So I would think for women, children, disabled families, that you would consider some sort of tiny home village, or implementing that or discussing that somehow and how that might work for this homeless population here in Santa Cruz, to help them and for the minimize the environmental impact of a single person. So thank you.
If you agree with me, stand up and give them applause for listening and for our talk.
First off, I wanted to acknowledge one of the things that I heard in the audience this evening. Santa Cruz has, and the downtown community, or the community that we have, has a population of people who have been living homeless. And I think that in addition to the people who we have who are being put into homelessness due to a variety of reasons, including not being able to afford rent or being forced into evictions or orders to quit and putting them on the streets, I also want to acknowledge that the university is playing a role in this as well, and that by putting students who are homeless on their campus, by not allowing them to sleep on campus, that's further adding to the situation that we have to deal with. And I so want to ask staff if they could reach out to the university to find out and encourage them to see if they are they're able to provide alternatives for their homeless students, allowing them to sleep on campus, and also if there are parking options and opportunities for students who sleep in their cars to sleep in their cars on campus, so that we can have some help with addressing our homeless population, and that the university is actually helping us by helping to provide alternative sleeping arrangements for students. In addition to that, I would like to make an amendment to the motion that's been provided around the date of the abatement, and I would like to make an amendment to the current motion that this come back to the council on March 12th at our meeting for us to evaluate the camp current, or at that point in time, to see how much services we've been able to provide, and determine at that point whether or not it would be a point where we would want to close the camp or keep it open and consider other options.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks to everyone for coming out and sharing your perspectives and opinions. A lot of really important things to take into consideration with shared experiences, individual experiences of being homeless yourselves, or people that are coming from neighborhoods and running businesses concerned about safety. So I really appreciate you bringing all that forward and sharing it with us. I want to address what was said at the beginning of the meeting specifically, and I want to point out that I think it was a rather inequitable decision for the mayor to make a lengthy statement at the beginning of the meeting, reference me personally, and then refuse to let me respond. So, to respond, after weeks of working with fellow council members, interns, community members, advocates, people experiencing homelessness, residents of the Ross Camp who actually live there currently, and people who live in cars, so making sure that there's that representation, we created a set of policy proposals. The policy proposals were refused for the reason that it would take too long, which is something that we heard a little bit earlier, that didn't have time to get it on the agenda. I saw the draft agenda, just so the community knows, and it showed an estimation of this meeting time ending at 9:30. So that's only 2.5 hours to discuss such an important issue of homelessness that was allocated on the draft agenda. With the issue of homelessness, the sheer volume of suffering taking place, to cite time as an obstacle is disappointing. If we have possible solutions that can be explored and discussed, we need to be here until 2 a.m. if necessary. I have a dog, I have responsibilities, but I was elected to do what's best for the city, and that will require sacrifice and at times long meetings. So the concept of trading my time for another person's suffering is, in my opinion, abhorrent. Mayor Watkins also brought up her gender as a reason for the I don't even know, for the community organizing approach maybe, or for me educating the community about what's going on, but I want to emphasize that that really shows how little she knows about me. I'm an advocate for the rights of women, girls, and trans folk. I sat on the city's commission for the prevention of violence against women, where I urged the commission to recommend the city council adopt the convention for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And I'm pushing, and one reason I'm pushing so hard is because all of the women, girls, and vulnerable folk that are sleeping in the camp because they have no place to go, are at risk of violence, sexual abuse, and exploitation right now. Too true. I want the community to know that I'm a community organizer. I care about inclusion, I care about representation. I want to assure Mayor Watkins that I would have taken the same approach of building community support if she was a man, or a woman, or a non-binary person. The issue is not about gender or race. It is an issue of morality and principle. It is about prioritizing time over prioritizing people. I think we see this not only with Mayor Watkins' refusal to agendize the items for action, but instead gave me the option, so instead of agendizing them, she gave me the option to make a motion with direction. And And I want to make sure that the community understands who don't know the process, that if an agenda item is not on the agenda, then we can't take any action on it. So the earliest, any of my policy suggestions, 5-point policy plan that I brought forward, the soonest anything can be deliberated on for actual action is at our next city council meeting. That's 2 weeks away. 14 more days before we can start actually looking at innovative, and as some people mentioned, radical solutions. So I hope that we can work through whatever this conflict is. But I must say that I find it offensive and in some ways irresponsible for her to try to belittle my effort to educate the community about the process and the impacts of her decision. So with that, I will make my motion. I'm going to pass these around. Here you go. If you can pass them that way. There's one over there. I'm going to make an alternative motion. Yeah. So here's this and these. Going over here this way. So I want to make a motion. So get ready for it. It's about 1.5 pages long because I had to put everything into a single motion so that I could have the community hear what's going on and ideally have the support of my colleagues to instruct staff to move on these issues. I move that the city council adopt the recommendations of the city staff for 1A, 1B, not C, and number 2. I also move in that same motion, which you can find the rest of this here, that to direct staff to put on the agenda the following items for council consideration and action. Between now and the next city council meeting on February 26th, instruct staff to A, provide a resolution to the city council for the city of Santa Cruz to proclaim a local homeless state of emergency. And B, a report identifying all potential locations for a transitional encampment on city-owned property and any identified opportunity sites on private property within the city of Santa Cruz or city-owned property in unincorporated Santa Cruz County. And C, an action item to recommend to remove overnight parking restrictions on Delaware Avenue between Swift Street and Schaefer Road. D, a report and recommendations based on the ordinance submitted this evening, which you'll find in your packets. The establishment of transitional encampments for people experiencing homelessness and an interim use on publicly owned or private property within the city of Santa Cruz, including E, if necessary, a draft ordinance amending the municipal code to establish a permit process for such encampments, and F, a report and timeline to enter into negotiations with UCSC with the intention of leasing the vacant lot at the rear of the UCSC administration building at 2300 Delaware Avenue for the establishment of a safe parking program. G, the first draft of an ordinance based off the framework submitted this evening in your packets to come back for a first reading at the next city council meeting to hear community input and response with regards to the safe parking program. H, a report from Parks and Rec regarding the reopening of public facilities and bathrooms based on the materials submitted this evening in your packet. I, to direct the city attorney and to coordinate city staff efforts to examine specific city ordinances concerning the disproportionate effect on residents without homes and to examine the potential conflicts with both the specific law and the spirit of the U.S. Constitution as interpreted by the Boise decision, and return to the city council with this data within 90 days of camping, sleeping ordinance, trespassing ordinance, urination and defecation ordinance. Then J, direct staff to make data available in an organized format in the following ordinances to allow the council and the community to monitor the potential disproportionate impacts on residents without homes. This data shall include the address and the race and gender of the person cited, the charges, the location, date, and arresting officer or ranger. Concerning stay-away orders, the length of stay-away orders, and shall also include conduct in parks, obstructing sidewalks and benches, obstructing sidewalks and benches after night, sitting, next page, lying, 24-hour stay-away orders, smoking bans in public places, dogs downtown and elsewhere, arrest 3 infractions without a warrant, authority of the city attorney to reduce misdemeanors to infractions to avoid due process, open containers, parking garage loitering, median loitering, safety enhancement zones, youth curfew laws, aggressive solicitation, and vendor licensing required for handicrafts. So I would love to make that and submit the motion for consideration by my peers so that we can not only move forward with this, but then also start really taking tangible action on making sure we can solve these problems so that we can address the concerns of the neighbors that are inundated by the impact of a camp structure like the one at the Gateway Plaza, and then also working towards a sense of compassion, justice, and equity. I'll close my motion really quick with a quote from Dr. King to try and encourage my council member colleagues, which is, "We're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality." Thank you.
Sorry about that.
So I think the best, or one path out that would work would be to divide the motion into what is before us, and then have the council vote on that, and then move on to the additional recommendations. Does that feel comfortable? Okay.
Make comment.
Closer.
I would like to add that to the motion regarding the recommended city council action, item C. And I want to state the reason for that, and I'll make an amendment to that. And please, I would like to have, thank you, a discussion with respect. This represents significant progress in our relationship with the county and getting the county health services agency, human services to work with the city and all the other departments and partners. Finally, for the first time in this very difficult discussion, we actually do have significant money available to us. We're trying to figure out how to begin using some of that money for immediate services with the goal of spending the bulk of it on real physical facilities for longer term assistance for homelessness relief. This was the action adopted by the county. I think it's really important that we mirror their action. And I think if you look at C, it could be, it talks about a planned, I would say closure. I agree with the use of the word abatement. A planned closure by March 15th. You don't get somewhere without having a target.
Can't evict people if you don't place them.
All right. I'm trying to explain my logic here to my fellow council members. What's intended here in B is a really serious, aggressive effort to get a variety of shelter facilities up and running, some in the city, VFW in the county, and working with the faith communities, with aggressively pursuing small-scale city parking programs, and there are other possibilities as well. The armory was mentioned. I know that is included in this discussion here as shelter options that have previously been used or something like that. So I really want to fully encourage that we take this opportunity of available money and an unprecedented partnership with the county and get going on this. That the impetus for doing that will be the intention to close the Gateway Plaza Encampment. We can come back with reports at both of our upcoming council meetings as to how that's going. So I would like to make that amendment
to the motion that, as I understand it, currently sits on the floor, that would add item C back in there. Just mentioning a planned closure by March 15th with reports back to council at our upcoming meetings.
Don't do it,
So
Joseph.
we have an opportunity now for our council to take action and to deliberate, and we appreciate you being here and talking to us, and we appreciate all your opinions. But now's the chance for us to find areas of alignment for movement and action in an effort to meet the needs of our community. And so I appreciate your respect in that regard. Everyone has an opportunity to speak. So we have Councilmember Matthews putting a request to the maker of the motion to reintroduce C as a potential possibility, knowing that there would be updates before the 13th date, but as a estimated approach. Okay, and that's the maker.
Well, I put that to the maker of the motion as request. Okay.
So I'd be interested, can I ask to hear from my fellow council members about their thoughts around that before I either accept or refuse it?
Okay, I'll go ahead. Can I acknowledge this Vice Mayor, because he mentioned he wanted.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Vice Mayor, and then.
So, the first thing I want to say is to the community, and I just want to encourage folks that, we're in working with the county and having worked on the 2x2 committee with staff and having reached out to people in the community, one of the things that we really need from the community is for you all to continue to reach out to people around you in the public and private sector and find out who is willing to actually allow us to utilize their space for providing more homeless services. Because that's a big thing for us, is that people want us to do something about the homeless situation in Santa Cruz, but nobody wants to offer the space in their neighborhoods.
True.
So we understand that, currently where the camp is at the Gateway Plaza, that there have been people from those communities, some of which are low-income communities, and have already been facing some of the, bigger social injustice impacts that we have in our community. And they're some of the people who are coming to us asking that we do something. And they're not telling us just rush and push everybody out. What they're asking us for is help in finding alternatives, and they're also asking us for making sure that their neighborhoods are safe. And so with that, I would just like to say that having worked with the county on this, I think that as we move forward with regards to letter C of this, that we should, and I also want to point out one other thing too, is that it's 10:40, and I do understand that we want to address these issues as best we can. And by bringing this forward and in support of the decision of the mayor to not include these items, I do want to say that we're just getting to one item right now, and if we had had 5 more, given the fact that yes, we should be spending a lot of time on this, but at 5 o'clock in the morning, having been sitting in meetings since 11 a.m., will we be making the best decisions that are going to affect our entire community? And I think that as a sleep deprived city council, we would not be in a position to be making the best, most effective decisions for our community, given the fact that we will not be in the best states of mind. So I do want to keep that in mind, that we are trying to be mindful of time when we're trying to set up these meetings. I personally think that tonight we're proposing ways that we can start addressing this issue starting tomorrow. So I think that our intention was to make sure that we start acting on this immediately.
Oh, no.
And I do want to, with regards to C, rather than having a plan, well, we can plan the closure for March 15th, but I think that what would be a friendly amendment would be to revisit our situation on the 12th, and we can determine at that point in time whether or not we want to move forward with the closure of the camp, or if we should have alternatives at that point in time.
I wish I didn't vote for you, Justin.
Okay. That's essentially the friendly amendment that I believe was offered on behalf of.
I believe there were 2 friendly amendments offered at this point.
I want to make sure that we're really clear on where we're at with this. We have a divided motion, one that encompasses the recommended city council and county action that is now having on the table a amendment to modify C to essentially
Basically say, planned closure on March 15th to be revisited at our upcoming council meetings. And I would say both upcoming council meetings.
Okay.
Good idea.
And that essentially covers what I believe.
So we would revisit this on the 29th, well, 22nd. My intention with this is that on the 12th or beforehand, we can revisit whether or not closing it on the 15th would be an appropriate action to take.
But including including that as the action now, which is essentially the same thing. So they are the same amendment.
22nd and the 12th.
Okay.
So as I understand it, we would do the 30-day notice however on February 26th, and then we would check in with the council to see if we still wanted to keep with that date. And then again, we would check on the second meeting in March, which is the 12th, and to check to see if you still want to keep to that date. So we can do that.
Is that
I would be open to extending the 30-day period to a 60-day period, and then have a reevaluation at the next 2 meetings to find out if that 60-day closure period will be sufficient. I would also move or add to my motion to remove the term abatement, and replace it with something less dehumanizing.
okay? So maybe so the friendly amendment is not accepted as my.
Not interpret that as acceptance of the friend.
Okay, so I think what would be, I'll go ahead. So what I think would be appropriate is if a council member wanted to make an amendment and then we could vote on the amendment. If that passes, then we could go back to the original motion. Does that seem appropriate, Mr. Kentucky?
Yes, the council member could make a motion to amend part 1 of the main motion.
Okay, is there a motion?
Yes, so I will move that we add item C, return item C to the recommended action, changing the word full abatement to closure.
With the direction as previously outlined.
With the direction to return to council with an update at both of our next meetings.
Okay. Is there
the progress?
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second, a motion to amend the main motion to incorporate that language. We could go ahead and vote on that and then go on to the.
This is on the motion to amend the main motion.
This is on the motion to amend. All those in favor on the motion to amend the main motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
That passes with, no. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, no. Okay. That passes with Council Member Matthews, Myers, Vice Mayor Cummings, and myself in favor, Councilmember Crone, Glover, and Brown voting against. And now we'll return to the vote of the amended.
Part 1 of the main motion.
We'll return to.
As amended.
Okay, we'll return to part 1 of the main motion as amended. And that's essentially what we see before us. 1 and 2.
That is except as modified by the.
As modified by the amended. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No. Okay, so that passes with Councilmember Matthews, Vice Mayor Cummings, Councilmember Myers, and myself in support of that action. Councilmember Brown, Crone, and Glover voting against. And now we'll move on to the final component of the motion, which is essentially the recommendations that were handed out by Councilmember Glover, correct?
Motion for part 2.
I believe that was 1 and 2.
I believe it was 1A, B, and C as amended.
And 2.
And
So we all
item
do,
2.
okay.
That's right.
So now we'll go ahead and move on to what is before us, which is to essentially agendize the following outline provided in regards to specific actions for the next city council meeting, which would be on February 26th. Correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And that is a motion by Councilmember Glover, second by Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Brown.
Again, tangent, I'm hoping to get my questions answered regarding the armory and discussions with the Learning Center about Lot D at the end of the facility.
Yeah, so I can answer the question about the Warming Center, and then Tina and I can talk about the armory. Sergeant Carter Jones and I met with Mr. Adams on Friday, did a walk around of the facility and did speak to some of the tenants that were in the same building as the Warming Center storage program. There is an accessible pathway from the levee path to the levee side or the west side of the building. That would be a much more direct access to the Warming Center storage program. I'm in agreement with Sergeant Jones that that's something that we should consider helping out with. I do think it would greatly lessen the foot traffic that goes all the way around the building to access the Warming Center. So you have to go all the way down Felker, enter through the front of the building, through the parking lot, and go to the very back side to access the storage facility. So I have advised Mr. Adams to apply for HEAP and CASH funding for the capital improvements bucket to think about kind of the bigger scope. I know that he has other things that he would like to see done. For the purposes of immediate action, I do think we should help to facilitate opening up the fence in one section so it can be a gate, and possibly putting some hard surface down so folks that might be mobility or impaired or have push carts or whatever could access the storage program from that side. So I would like to work with city staff to figure out how to support him with that.
Just a quick follow-up question there, and thank you for that. Will that be coming back to council, or is that just something that can move ahead? We don't need to take action.
No, I don't think so.
Great, thank you.
And then Martine or Tina can talk a little bit about what we've learned in the last couple of weeks as to the armory.
Yeah, thank you for that question, the armory. So council might recall last year when we were working on the site in question, that is the one site council actually provided direction on, go ahead and try to use the armory facility for a 6-month period for our phase 2 of our 3-phase plan. I believe that was your motion, Councilmember Brown. Within 10 days, literally, of that council action, we heard definitively back from I forget the exact individual, right, but the armory management that, in fact, it would not be available because this planned renovation of the facility was actually going forward. They had it funded, budgeted for years, and nothing was happening, and we thought it was inactive. And they said, no, we're actually going to start. So that was supposed to commence in October of last year. And we learned just this past week that nothing has happened with the armory. So some sense of significant disappointment there. And this is something that we're interested in following up on. So earlier in our presentation, I think there was a part D of like the plan and also talking about exploring other sites as possible. So that's clearly up there and something that I think, and validation from the council that would be of interest would be helpful as well, because we can reach out to our state representatives and our partners on the system. So if that's an alternate site that still would be of interest, that would be good to get that sense.
Quick follow-up question there. Would you need that as a motion to include that, or just as a consensus, taking consensus?
A motion is always wonderful to have that clarity and that clear expressing interest. That's always helpful for us to have that council interest.
I want to make sure I'm not out of order, but I do want to make sure that that motion gets made, that we give the opportunity to make that motion before we close this agenda item.
Okay.
I just had a couple of quick things. One was just wanted to clarify with respect to the main motion whether the council had wanted to consider the additions that the county made to their motion with respect to the security and the allocation or the reconfiguration of the encampment. Just want to be clear whether that was something you wanted to include or not. That was my motion, right? So that was included.
Yeah, it was that was my motion.
Let's have it on record. That was in the motion that Donna made.
Yes. And the one that.
Okay.
Exactly. That's
So,
what I want to make sure.
Okay, so then
Okay, I'd like to suggest we clean up this one first before we go on to this. And so,
so that one's been voted on.
that much has been voted on, but I'd like to add, to move that we add to this motion the additional direction given by the county, which was provision of security to minimize neighborhood impact, moving the encampment fence back. And again, I think the importance here is that it's a collaborative plan.
Point of order, isn't there a motion on the floor currently? It's the second part of the motion that
You
you
can have multiple motions on the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was just a question with respect to
And I wanted to just.
outstanding things, and you've got yours to keep on the list. And then the other one, with respect to your motion, just wanted to point out that with respect to the items here, just to be clear, that some of these we may not be able to fully complete in 2 weeks, just simply because the time frame to get these completed would be, the packet goes out on 21st, so it really just gives us about 6 days to get all this complete. So we'll certainly do our best, but we might not be able to have all the ordinances drafted or all the calls made and all the communication back from the university, for example, and that sort of thing. We can do an update on where we are with each one of them, but I just wanted to be clear so that the expectation is that it will be 100%. Because it's probably unlikely given the short time frame that we have between now and the next council meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, as my understanding is one motion at this time, with other potential motions waiting.
Part 2 of the main motion is still on the floor,
Part 2 of the main motion is still on the floor, and that's the only motion on the floor. Okay.
as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and vote on part 2 of the main motion, and then revisit the additional conversation around the alignment with the county actions, as well as the recommendation.
Got his hand up.
By Councilmember Brown. Yeah, I thank you.
You didn't seem to notice.
Yeah, okay, well, let me just go ahead and pause here for a second. Why don't we go ahead and take a brief recess? We'll take about 5 minutes, we'll reconvene, and then we'll discuss. And at that time, we'll have our opportunity for deliberation and action, and I'll ask that the community allow us to do that.
Maybe you
So
would
we'll
like
take a
him to
5-minute
speak too.
recess, and then we received a letter from our colleagues at the county in our 2x2 committee expressing their appreciation of the participation and collaboration, as well as further explaining their support of the recommended action with the additional considerations as listed by previous council members, which incorporated some security as well as movement of the location away from our river bed. So that came in earlier today from the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Councilman Brown and Matthews, for acknowledging my hand up first. I will say that it has been a pattern throughout the evening that you look to your left first before you look to your right. So that's why I was kind of like, but that's okay. I want to emphasize that there is a lot encompassed in this document, and I will acknowledge that, and I totally understand what City Manager Bernal is referring to with regards to time associated. I will point out, though, that some of them are to come back within 90 days. So specifically lines I and J are to come back within 90 days. So that should loosen it up a little bit. And also I want to emphasize for my fellow colleagues, because unfortunately since these weren't agendized, I couldn't share all of the documentation with you to review ahead of time effectively as it would have been in your agenda packets if it had been. So I understand that there's the desire for there to be more community input and a little bit more opportunity for people to not only share their perspectives, but also for us to be able to dig deeper into some of these different issues, which is the impetus of me bringing this forward tonight so that we could have the staff. The only actionable item that I'm asking to come back for on the 26th is items A and items, oh no, not just items A, oh, and item C. So item A, which is we're coming back with language which I believe after speaking with City Attorney Kandati, we already have the language for the resolution proclaiming a homeless state of emergency. And the logic around the homeless state of emergency, just because some people get it confused with shelter emergency, is we declared a state of shelter emergency so that it would be applicable for us to receive the HEAP funds, the $9 million that we're talking about. We had to declare a shelter emergency. The difference with the declaration of homeless state of emergency is it opens up the bureaucratic barriers that tend to slow down the process of establishing different kinds of transitional encampments, as well as it makes it so that we can kind of circumvent some zoning regulations so that we can get us into places in and find more applicable locations where we can establish transitional encampments. One of those models is Dignity Village, which was referenced before. And so I want to just let that be known, just to clarify in case anyone had any questions. And then also, yeah, so the second half from I down is all 90 days, and then everything else is to come back with a report of feasibility or just the perspective of the staff, and then for discussion and deliberation at the 26th meeting.
So can I just ask for clarification, because what I just heard Councilmember Glover say is not consistent with the way I read the language of the motion. So the action items that you're requesting for the 26th are A and C, and then a report back on the 26th on items B and D through H, and then items I and J to come back within 90 days.
Correct.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that I'll reserve my comments because I think it's been covered. Thanks.
To me, this is just overload. There's so much in here. Each one has a different level of review, of probably process, both for the public and going through commissions for one thing or another. And honestly, I'm happy to look at it, but I don't feel at all comfortable putting this yet additional workload on our staff. All the stuff we loaded on them this afternoon. Everything implicit in getting these programs up and running. You know, I appreciate the intent here. There are a lot of things. A quick glance at them, I see some that make sense to me, but others I would be absolutely opposed to. And I'm just going to vote no on the package.
And then, I'm sorry, Councilmember.
Not enough time to process.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Councilmember Myers and then Vice Mayor Cummings, and then back to Councilmember.
Yeah, I appreciate the information and the pack that's been provided to us, and I'm happy to try to look at these things. My biggest concern right now is to try to make sure we have staff resources focused on getting people into shelter. That's what I'd like to see done with our staff time, and I'd like to make sure that's done in a way that's predictive for the community, that is done well, and that we focus on that. We need to get these people who are living in those conditions into other types of housing right away. So I appreciate that this is a complement, a set of additional ideas that deserve attention, and we can pull these up. There's a few things in here that I just not, for example, the hours of public facilities. That's a big conversation, and there's just a few things in here that I feel like are going to take away from the focus of trying to get people in shelter right now. I do have a question, Councilmember Glover, about the safe parking residents. Here, I'm just curious, is this different than what was in the staff recommendation? There was in the staff recommendation that we voted on, there's mention of initiation of a small-scale safe parking program specifically. Is this a different safe parking program that you're proposing here?
It is, and we've met with the Association of Faith Communities to compare notes and talk about the differences. Theirs are smaller with potentially 5 vehicles. This would be to establish a parking location for 15 to 20 vehicles.
Okay, and I'll just remind us that we don't want to get too in-depth with discussing the content of the
So I'm good, thank you.
Vice Mayor, and then you.
So, first I just want some clarification. Would we be bringing back action item A on the 26th of February and item action C?
Yes. That would be an anticipation that we will have community input on item C and then make an informed decision on how to move with staff after that.
And then we'd have staff addressing B, D, E, F, G, H. what would happen with those items?
Those ones would, since I've had interns working on doing the research and kind of pulling out the backgrounds and recommendations on everything, as well as working alongside local advocates. The content is here, essentially. All the research has been done that can provide the preliminary analysis of the proposed ideas. So this packet essentially is for staff to be able to take, look at the work that's already been done, come back with a report based off of what they perceive from the reports that we have, and then come back so we can have a conversation about it at the 26th meeting, so that we can decide either if we want to move on any of the things based off of staff recommendations, or whether they identify that they need more time and report the progress they've made thus far.
So my understanding is that we're going to bring the language back as is of A and C on the 26th for discussion. And then items B, D, E, F, G, and H, you're directing staff to look into what you're doing and then to bring a report back to see if we could put it on for the 26th or could put it on later. I'm just trying to get this to have a good understanding, because while I do, same thing, this is a lot to take in, and I know that staff is also has a lot going on with trying to get this stuff moving forward. That being said, I do want to respect the time and effort that you put into this, because I think that there's a lot of good things in here that that'll probably help with our efforts to deal with a lot of the homeless situation. I do want to be respectful of people's time and our ability to do this in a way that we can do it well, and make sure that it's something that not only is effective now, but it's something that we can use moving into the future. And so I just don't want us to do this with too much haste, in the sense that we might not be able to do it correct the first time.
I'm going to support the motion, and I just want to make the following comments. I understand that what we're doing here is a direction to come back for for particular actions, but also for consideration of these additional provisions, and some of which I wholeheartedly support, some of which I kind of contingently support, and some of which I have concerns about. But what I understand here is that we're opening up the opportunity to have that conversation. I trust that staff will let us know in a staff report back if they, how much of this information they've been able to gather, how much of a recommendation they feel comfortable making at that time, and staff will do what they do, and they'll get us the best information they can for our deliberations, and it may be that we continue the conversation. So I don't think that supporting this motion here tonight suggests that we are going to demand that our staff take on all of these immediately in lieu of the other efforts that have been undertaken. And so with that, I'd say I'm going to support the motion. Look forward to having that conversation.
Okay, Councilmember Myers. I'd like to just call the question.
So we have to call the question for the motion as before us. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. No. Okay, so that passes with Councilmember Crone, Glover, Vice Mayor Cummings, Brown voting in support, Councilmember Matthews, Myers, and myself voting against. Okay, so at this point, we'll go ahead and end that. And we're not done. So at this time, I'd like to ask if there would be a motion to put on the floor some modifications to the recommendation of the agenda item that we previously voted on, encompassing some of the additional direction, potentially, and then we can go from there.
Did we add, if we could pull up the language that the county added to the first part of the main motion. Yeah. That we add, provide 24-hour security to minimize neighborhood impact, move encampment fence to provide setback from the levee pathway, a proactive neighborhood outreach plan to ensure a strong connection between the operator and the neighbors, and direct collection of basic data on clients served at the city or county-funded programs and facilities in order to better understand the demographics and circumstances of those served.
So is that a motion to?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilmember Matthews, is there a second? I'll go ahead and second that. Okay, all those in favor, please.
The motion back.
Yeah, okay, it's this, those two. And then I added direct, let me see here. I'm trying to piece together two different things. Move the encampment fence, develop a proactive neighborhood outreach plan to ensure strong communication between the operator and the neighbors, and direct collection of basic data on clients served at city or county-funded homeless programs and facilities in order to better understand the demographics and circumstances of those served. The purpose of that is simply to know the variety of needs and circumstances and who we're serving so that we can better shape. Sure.
Okay, thank
Can I
you.
ask a point of clarification from staff's perspective?
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is potentially a conflation of Donna's motion that is more relevant to future shelter opportunities, and what the county approved was specifically for the Gateway Encampment. So I just wanted to make sure that those.
Yeah, that's quick.
Okay.
So I would say implementation of homeless services in the city will have a proactive neighborhood outreach plan, provide 24-hour security, or security during hours of operation. I'm going to put it that way because they're not all 24 hours. The implementation of homeless services in the city, including the proposed shelters, will provide security during operating hours, proactive neighborhood outreach plan, the other language ran excuse me, Bonnie. I did a little time work. I'll get you the exact language here. The proactive neighborhood outreach plan to ensure strong communication between the operator and the neighbors, and directing collection of basic data.
So that's the motion. There's a second. At this time, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay. Councilmember Brown.
I would move that we direct staff to include the National Guard Armory in consideration of potential shelter space, and then report back to us. When does staff think that might be feasible for report back?
I think we should try for the 26th.
Okay. On the 26th for consideration.
So there's a motion by Councilmember Brown.
So we're going to the same place here.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. Can I make a friendly amendment to that?
You should offer it to her.
Yeah, offer. That we, that in addition to the recommendation earlier, that we actually direct staff to reach out to UCSC to look into ways that they can, like potential opportunities for them to house homeless students or allow for homeless students who sleep in their cars to sleep and give their cars on campus.
If I could, just for clarification, I believe that was encompassed in that other motion.
I think this is different. I think what's included in here is to lease to lease the building at Delaware. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'll be reaching out to Chancellor Blumenthal when we meet tomorrow morning about this.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion? Any clarification on the language needed? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that too passes.